May I please have your full and undivided attention? It is time for the Paranormal Rundown.
Hello, everybody. This is the last episode of the Paranormal Rundown Countdown to 2025. This episode is going to be very simple. We're just going to go back through the clips and talk about them a little bit. I have not felt well, and I just want to get this out before the year is over.
And we want to try not to make this one 3.5 hours long, like the last one.
Yeah, that 3.5 hours does make for some editing challenges. One of the best things we've been able to do on the Paranormal Rundown is attract some very, very intelligent, worldly people who've had some genuine experiences in their lives. And we've also been able to go outside of the strict paranormal realm. Episode 16, we had Bert, who is a Dutch physician, a Dutch psychiatrist, and a deeply brilliant man. He's the kind of person that I really like to find, someone with a deep understanding of academics, someone who's been through the work to get those sort of degrees, but doesn't discount the sort of things that we generally try to talk about here on the Rundown. And in episode 16, we started talking about foreign accent syndrome, which then evolved into some other issues, all of which have to do with, I guess the word I would use is brain malleability, where you're going through the world just fine with your brain as it's set up. You get hit in the head with a wrecking ball. Or maybe not a wrecking ball, but next thing that the world sees is that you are speaking with a different accent, or perhaps even speaking a different language entirely. These brain changes, to me, are extremely interesting things, and Bert had quite a bit to say about that. Foreign accent syndrome is when I've heard about two forms of it. One of them is after a head injury, blunt head trauma. Somebody will wake up from a period of time with a coma, and they will find themselves speaking in a perfect British or Dutch or French accent, which to me is a pretty fascinating thing. And I've also heard about it happening after just psychological trauma.
And dementia is also...
with dementia.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about Schwarzenegger, but that's another...
That would be a foreign accent. If I suddenly started talking in full-on Schwarzenegger speak, that would be appropriate.
Pete Holmes does a phenomenal sound of his, and he has entire bits in which that's all he does. In fact, there's a famous skit in which he's doing an infomercial for Accent Be Gone, and he's talking just like a regular American would, and then it begins to lose its effect, and you start to hear the rah speak through, and it's just hilarious. It's really good.
It would be interesting to see in documented cases of this, whether the foreign accent is true to the actual country or culture it came from, or true to our perception of that accent, right? Because it's different. You have ways that you think somebody speaks, or you may sound like if you practice speaking like them, and that's not quite the same as the true accent of that culture.
Well, you're right. So are these people speaking as if they've truly inherited that part of an Italian brain or a French brain or a Japanese brain or something, or are they just mimicking what they've heard somewhere in the past?
Right. So mimicking what they've heard in the past could imply that this is a part of their brain that's remembering something and applying it to them, right, to their speech pattern. Whereas a true accent of a specific area in a region they've never been to or listened to would be something they could not have pulled out of their own memories, and therefore maybe they're tapping into something else, something that is universal in how the brain works and people work and people function, sort of like that universal library we talk about, right? The memory is elsewhere, or the body is a conduit for it, and, you know, maybe they opened a different chapter in a wrong book, and now they're emulating that story as opposed to something they've physically run into before.
I don't know, but I wonder if this lasts for the remainder of their life, or if it's a period of time, then they go back to speaking the way they normally speak.
Or if they get knocked upside the head again, they switch languages. Spanish. Okay, we're good.
No,
the next week,
Russian. You know that. I mean, the brain is amazing in what it can do, but it's very simple things can trip it up. For example, if you ever find yourself walking into another room and suddenly forgetting what you were there for, it's called the doorway effect. And
that happens to me all the time.
Yeah, and it's because of the fact that your brain segments reality into, you know, very short little areas. And by changing your locale, by going through a doorway in particular, then your brain shifts context. And it's easy to forget what you're doing. But by contrast, it's a phenomenal way to try to establish something into longer term memory. By purposefully crossing doorways while studying, it can help to firmly embed whatever that is into your memory. It's kind of amazing.
I always thought it was because I was getting old and from years of taking medications for neck problems. But I like your explanation much, much better. Well, Bert, what do you think is happening in the situation with the foreign accent? What do you think is happening in the mind or the brain when that happens? Let's make an assumption. Let's make the assumption that it is not an accent the person has been exposed to. What would account for that in your experience?
If someone just started to talk in an accent of a foreign accent, which the person never heard before, but someone else knows well this is a Mandarin accent he is having, or some other accent, more exotic accent, I would have no clue as to why that would happen, and or how it because it reminds me as well as the persons what you've told me who have been possessed and talking in a complete different language. Mm-hmm. And it's the same question I always have: is it really spoken in that language with that it makes sense and that it is also the accent is correct, the dialect is correct, or is it the interpretation how someone perceived that language?
And that's interesting. You know, the exorcist will record that and take it to a specialist, right, in that language, and that's often what they say is that's one of the diagnostic. They're speaking perfect Italian, perfect Ukrainian, or whatever language it is. It's not just bits and pieces they may have picked up or gobbledygook, right?
Because the poor girl in Germany, she spoke German, of course, and she was possessed by Hitler. And what was her name?
Wait. That was a pretty big jump. What would... you got to give us a little more background.
Well, she's that famous girl.
The name they used in a movie here was Emily Rose.
Yeah, but it was not her. It was
something, wasn't it?
Annalise Michelle or Michael.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And what I remember, there are tapes of that exorcism.
Uh-huh.
And but she shouts in German and what I recall, not a foreign language.
Well, I mean, she was a German shouting in German.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know quite a few German people, and they are very much like Americans. And some people are soft-spoken, and some people are not soft-spoken. And then you have guys like Hitler, and Hitler worked most of his life to try to figure out how to be really, really persuasive with his words. Mm-hmm. There are pictures of Hitler standing in front of a mirror, watching his face, and doing everything in the world he can to become the world's best orator. And I'm sure he did a really, really good job of that. I have heard one recording of Hitler's non-oration voice. And it's just a mundane conversation. Something like, "Oh, what kind of soup are they serving today?" or something like that. But it's a totally different voice.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I could speak like Hitler. I don't think I could. Maybe with a year of practice, I could have that kind of, I don't know, very persuasive, almost yelling kind of speech he did.
Well, and you would have to watch hours and hours of video of him to try to get that down, right?
And the intonation.
It's just like English, right? I mean, look, you talked about hearing angry Cajun, right? Mm-hmm. I grew up in Southwest Virginia. I've got relatives that I know you would not understand what they said, right?
Right.
It is very, drawn out, very almost guttural in some cases, almost like they're swallowing words. They're said differently. Mm-hmm. If you weren't exposed to that accent, there's no way you'd be able to recreate it. I was exposed to it, and I can't create it. I mean, I guess maybe if I was hit over the head and all of those memories were coalesced of all the speech I heard like that, perhaps I could recreate that. Do you see a way, Bert, for that to happen? Like, let's take that example. I've heard this accent for long periods of time in my childhood. Could something happen to where I could now speak just like them? Something happen to my brain?
I think it could. Yes, it reminds me of what I told you earlier. There was this woman who spoke in a dialect all her life, but only in the end, after having a few years with dementia, she started to speak just plain Dutch. Mm-hmm. And I come from an area where they have a very strong dialect, but my mother comes from an area who has not this dialect, and I've learned to talk because of my mother. So I can imagine that being exposed that much to that dialect, that if I hope not, but if I get such an accident or get Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, I will start talking in that dialect. But then again, it's because you're exposed so many hours and so many.
It's the building blocks of that dialect are in your brain already.
Yes.
And with Alzheimer's, that makes sense because I've had family members with Alzheimer's, and there is a regression to when you're younger very often, right? Reliving those experiences, actually literally hallucinating what you went through in childhood.
And what you often see is that people start with able to speak Dutch and going back to the dialect of their youth.
Really? That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, but not so much going from the dialect they spoke all of their lives to plain Dutch. That's not what I've seen often.
So with the second clip from Dr. Bert, we go into similar brain type issues. So the topic was about Omm Sety and this idea of having a personality that changes completely. You become a completely different person. This woman became something different, viewed life completely differently, had ancient knowledge. And so, how did that come about? And we go into the idea of this universal intelligence that maybe you could tap into. And we even go as far as epigenetics and the idea that maybe there is information that was encoded in DNA or in the genes that was passed down to her from, ancient ancestors. So it was a very interesting conversation.
Well, to me, one of the most interesting things about Omm Sety was that at some point, academia just stopped worrying about her origin story and
right.
And recognized her as a genuine expert in the field.
Yeah, you can't pick it apart, but for so long, and then you go, well, I don't have an answer, but all the information seems accurate, so we'll just go with that.
All right, let's hear about Omm Sety.
Have you guys heard of Omm Sety?
I've heard of Seti.
Yeah,
not. Would you say alms like
OMMSETY. OMMSETY.
What is it?
Okay, Omm Sety was a British woman who, when she was 3 years old, she had a very, very serious head injury. They didn't think she was going to survive. I'm trying to find out what her real name was. Dorothy Eddy was her actual name. And she's one of these people who started talking about, I'm not in my real home. And I don't remember if she saw a movie or a newsreel or a magazine or something that showed pyramids and sphinxes and, various Egyptian things. And she said, that's my home. That's where I'm supposed to be. And insisted on this for years and years and years and years. And she would talk about things. She would say, she would see a temple in some kind of travel documentary. And she would say, they don't have that quite right. The burial grounds were to the west of the temple, about 50 meters away. And the gardens were to the east of the temple. And she was so accurate in the stuff she said that they finally got her to Egypt. And once she was there, she said, I'm no longer Dorothy Eddy, I'm Omm Sety, and this is where I'm going to stay. This is my home. This is where I came from. So in her mind, and look, this isn't the kind of thing where after a few years they just thought of her as the crazy lady who lived out by the who lived out by the Sphinx. They thought of her as an Egyptologist who knew more about what was happening there than anyone else. So,
and that goes in line with some of the discussions we've had on reincarnation.
On reincarnation.
Or universal intelligence.
Yeah, same. Yeah,
yes,
possible.
If you're trying to be just totally materialist reductionist about that, I mean, could you say that, okay, something happened to her brain when she was a child, she looked through a lot of magazines that had pictures of Egypt, and she confabulated all of these different stories about Egypt. Well, yes, that could happen, but why would they have the degree of accuracy?
Well, I was going to say, that would assume that those old books were more accurate than current thought. And that's not usually the way it goes. You get more accurate as you learn more, not the other way around.
Right, you get more accurate as you go on. And I know she spent the rest of her life in Egypt and was considered a respected scholar of Egyptian history and Egyptology.
Well, universal intelligence. Talk about that, Bert. Lay it out.
It's an idea what I I read it somewhere about tapping into the universal intelligence if you wanted to achieve something. And also the what is it called, the 100th monkey effect or something,
which is a paranormal paranormal rundown topic. Yeah,
it's on the list. I love how the more of these episodes we have, the more these same concepts keep coming up and being connected.
They do.
So the episode with Father Wills, with Father Bob, we talked a little bit about memories being passed down through DNA.
Yeah.
Right? So now the question would be, the woman who became Omm Sety, is it possible she was descendant from Omm Sety and there was a genetic memory that was passed down through DNA to her? And is that universal intelligence tapping into some DNA mechanism where you're understanding something from the past because of your relationship to it? Or is it something external to the body altogether that you're tapping into, sort of what I think is happening behind the scenes, right? Not the physical body, but the universal potential consciousness, the way the universal works.
And I have no way of telling you that.
Well, I'm very disappointed, Vic. I was looking to you for answers.
Well, it's recently that we more and more start to understand that the DNA, how it is affected by the external by external influences, but also from parent to child. So that if a person experienced something traumatic, it gives changes in the DNA, which is passed on to the next generation.
Wait,
and
really?
Yes.
Like
Lamarckian
evolution.
Well, I think more what I understand. I'm not a geneticist, so there's a big disclaimer.
What you're talking about is a mechanism where existing DNA can be changed such that it can be inherited by offspring.
Exactly, and we know about epigenetics, of course. Yes. That chunks of DNA can be turned off and on and off.
Right.
And I can imagine this is some sort of mechanism as well. But the idea that there is that between the body and the outside world, we see it as it stops with the skin, but it is more, how do you say, it's more osmotic, so to speak.
Okay, good word, yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. Where the genetic information of the human body can absorb information from the outside world.
Yes. Okay. And that's, of course, there's this thought that psychotherapy can induce this as well. It changes your behavioral patterns, how you deal with stress and such, and that can be reflected on the DNA as well. But the mechanisms are not that clear yet.
I find that astounding. I mean, I guess the image I've always had in my mind is that we are given a DNA information set. Mm-hmm. And that's going to give us things like how big our ears are, what color hair we have, how tall we are, how resistant we are to certain organisms, all kinds of physical things. But at the end of your life, that set of genetic information will be the same as it was at the beginning of your life. Your body will change because of injuries and exercise and nutrition and all of that. But there's not any difference in the genetics. But you're talking about a situation where that's not quite the case.
No. And most will be epigenetics. So the core of the DNA will not be changed, but some parts are turned on or off.
Oh, that's amazing.
For replication. transcription into proteins and such.
Okay, so if there's the genetic part of me that gives me the superpower of speaking all languages instantly, I want to turn that one on. That's the
language man. Well, I have to say, on the genetic alterations, we've heard so far the idea that a very intense event could alter the genetics to be passed down to an aversion to that event, right? And Father Mike actually pulled a biblical reference out of that to go along with it, and I forget the exact reference. But it's really interesting to me that you're saying that psychotherapy, which is not, maybe intense, but it's an over time type of thing you would think is a gradual change, not you have just one intense session and then you've altered your whole personality. Mm-hmm. So a gradual thing could do the same thing.
I think so. I think it has a lot to do with relationships as well. For example, you have this I don't know how to say this in English. You have this kind of therapy that you have in a group, and it's a representation of the family. You want a representation of the family.
Okay.
So one of the group members is the subject and will decide who plays her parents.
It's a role-playing kind of therapy.
Exactly. Only what happens is the people are assigned the roles. Mm-hmm. But in these relationships, during that time, they show behavior that is not common to them, but is common to the person who they are representing. But they didn't know that. So.
Oh, okay.
So there's also a lot of information passed unconsciously to another person.
Even somebody who didn't. You're talking about someone taking on the characteristics of someone they don't even know.
Yeah. Yes.
That's astounding.
Wow.
Yeah.
Our next set of clips are going to be from episode 17. This was just a rundown crew episode, but boy, it was a really good one. There's a lot of good discussion, and I even had to trim these down a lot just so that we didn't have a 4-hour long episode. And the first one, we go through and talk about a topic that we don't hit enough. We do hit it about every couple of episodes, but that is UFO sightings. And this is probably one of the few full accountings of our experiences. So we have mine, which is fairly brief, and JJ's and Vic's. And then I went back to episode 7 from season 1 and pulled out Father Mike's because he was not in this recording, but I wanted to have all of our UFO stories together. It's fascinating that all 4 of us have seen something. And so there's obviously something going on.
Well, I'm going to just reiterate I don't know if I made this point in those episodes, but if you spend time looking up in the sky, especially at night, you will see things that you can't identify. Most of them are mundane, but I'm convinced that not all of them are.
I agree. And that is the case. I've spent a lot of time camping, and you look up enough. I'm surprised I've only had one sighting. But
well, I've always wondered, there could be a UFO, just 100 feet in the air, flashing lights and, aliens waving out the windows, and everybody on the ground would be looking at their phones.
That's right. So. Well, let's see what they are.
Academia has a really horrible habit of self-regulating itself. to the point of the nonsensical, where if anything is not conventional, then they will immediately roll it out and then attempt to discredit anyone who talks about things that are outside of their considered wheelhouse. And any discussion about the validity of extraterrestrial life or studying things along that nature has been, people have been immediately discredited for even entertaining that idea, which to me is patently ridiculous. And I was watching a talk by a professor, and I don't remember his name. This was probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, where he was saying, look, if we actually had some legitimate scientific inquiry into this, then maybe we would be a little more knowledgeable than what we are now. But instead, because we have turned our back and ridiculed anyone who's even remotely considered this to be a possibility or even just examine the possibility, then we're in the dark. And I completely agree with that.
Well, how many UFO sightings have you had, Dave?
One.
What was the sighting?
That was it was something that was back in 91, maybe, up above Fresno in the mountains. That was the thing that it moved in ways that we didn't have any craft that could move like that and then shot off into space.
But it was a light.
It was a light
that was moving in unconventional ways.
In unconventional ways. It came down and it flew up. I mean, it never got probably closer than that I remember. Like, it couldn't have been more than, it could have been 10, 15 miles from us. I mean, it's not like it came and flew over top of us.
Right.
We were sitting on the edge of a mountain at night, but we saw this light come down and it went. And now, the buddy that saw it with me, he says that it split into multiple lights.
Which,
and then rejoined together. I don't remember that, but this was a really long time ago. All I remember is it doing stuff that we didn't have anything that could do that. And certainly not at those speeds. Like, it would zigzag. I mean, like, it would go from one. I mean, when you're above Fresno, you're on the side of a mountain. We're up at like 7,500 feet. Okay. And there's nothing.
A long way at 7,500 feet.
Yeah. And there's nothing between you and the desert floor, right? It's straight down. It's the edge of the Sierra. And so you're looking out over the Central Valley of California. So you can see lights from a long, long freaking way away.
Right. Yeah.
And, all I know is it came in and it zipped from one side of our field of view to another in seconds. It would have crushed anybody human inside of that moving at speeds, that acceleration.
Yeah.
And then when it was done, it's not like it went on its way up the valley. It went up into space, right? It went up.
Right.
And then disappeared.
What about you, JJ?
I've had one.
Okay. Can you tell us about it, please?
Yeah. I think I was in 4th or 5th grade, and I was outside. It was at night, and in our yard we had 2 gigantic oak trees that had to be 150 years old. And there was a craft that flew directly over the oak tree that was by our driveway and hovered there. It had different lights on each one of its sides. I distinctly remember seeing an octagonal shape, and each side had a light that was on it. Both my grandmother and I witnessed this.
Excellent.
And then it shot off.
came to gaze at you and your grandmother, and
Yep. And
time to
then,
go.
And then sped off. I have
What
no
he doesn't
idea
remember
what it
was the 3 hours of time that he lost.
3 hours of time.
And he hasn't figured out what that lump is in
What's
his
that
shoulder.
lump under your shoulder?
And my butt was really sore the next
really
day.
sore.
Oh, you had to go there.
Had to go there. All right, I've seen multiple. Partially because I used to spend a lot of time doing astronomy, looking up at the sky. I had several telescopes, pretty advanced telescopes. But my favorite way of doing astronomy was not to use motors or steppers or anything like that. Just Dobsonian scopes, which is just a big tube with a mirror in it and eyepieces. And you move it around on a Teflon base. So it's very smooth. That's the most fun. It's the astronomy equivalent of a cane pole.
Mm-hmm.
For fishing. And what I would see there in North Carolina would be at least twice, probably 3 times. One was a little uncertain, but you would see these huge triangles. 200 yards on a side, something like that. So large that the way that you see them is because when you've got a 12-inch Dobsonian scope, when you're looking through it, and you've got it properly calibrated, and you've got, you're focused on infinity, you're looking at stars. All you see with a star is a tiny pinpoint of light. That's it. I mean, you're not seeing anything except that tiny pinpoint of light, unless you get a star cluster or a galaxy or something. But you would see a triangle of those stars disappear. And then that triangle would move across that star field, and you could follow it. So something was in the way.
Is there any way with those to tell distance?
Very, very difficult.
Because it would be hard to say, is that at, 5,000 feet and really big or really small? Or is it at 50,000 feet and really large?
You gain a certain ability to determine sizes by the fact that you will occasionally see airplanes fly across your field. And if an airplane is up at, say, 36,000 feet, cruising altitude, all you're seeing is something that's a bit bigger than what you see with your eye. So if you're doing this wide field astronomy, you're using a low power lens. You're not really trying to do a lot. What you're trying to do is get a lot of light to your eye. You're not trying to get a lot of magnification. So I would say that they were very high, very high in the 50,000 foot range. And in the 50,000 foot range, they were so much bigger than an airplane.
Right.
that you were seeing a meaningful portion of your field occulted by
and no lights, right?
Oh, no lights.
No lights at all on them.
I never saw any lights. Now, I've seen photos, especially from Belgium, where they've got lights on them, but I never saw any lights. It was just, here's this huge thing up there that's just moving along slowly and silently. It doesn't seem to be worried about airplanes running into it, which made me think it was really high. Okay, higher than an airplane would normally
paths,
fly.
yeah,
higher than the flight path. And it doesn't care if I know it's there.
Do you remember about what year this was at?
This would have been 2000 to 2006.
Okay.
Or so.
So not that long ago.
Not that long ago, no. And these were Celestron and Meade telescopes that I was using. Now, another time, and I've also seen lights move in anomalous ways. And in fact, I've seen so many of those that I just finally said, who cares? I can't there's no knowledge I can get from that light zipping across the sky other than it's there.
But when they're zipping across the sky, they're mainly one direction, right? You're not talking.
Oh, no, they'll stop and turn around and exactly what you're talking about.
Huh.
You know, where it'll be, if you're looking up, and when I was doing this kind of stuff, I'd use binoculars a lot. Binoculars are great. You can see so many stars with binoculars. and I would normally be using these big binoculars. And you could see something go, you would see it move through the binocular field. Put the binoculars down, and you could continue to see it, not because it was so much brighter than everything else, but because you could see it move. You could see it. You could see its motion. You could see its path, and it was like you just said, a zigzag. You know, zoop, stop, zoop, back the other way, covering 20 degrees of sky,
right?
Maybe 30. I mean, you know how big an area that is.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean,
it's massive.
Yeah, I mean, the moon is covering like a quarter of a degree. So we were driving in Kentucky, going to see my sister way out in rural Kentucky. This is where I learned how different my mind works from my family's. I was driving along, wife is reading over on the other side of the car or snoozing. Boys are in the back playing Pokemon on like Game Boys or whatever they had at the time. In any console that ever existed, they had. So I don't know which one it was, but I see a UFO up above a barn, multiple lights connected together, probably 50 feet across, this kind of thing, some kind of odd geometric thing. And I go, hey, all of you, wake up. You know, look up there. You know, guys, boys, look. What is that? Oh, yeah, that's a UFO, Dad.
Every time you tell this story, I just can't imagine what was running through your head when you went, huh?
It was like, you know, sorry, got to get me a Pikachu or whatever. But
I mean, especially for kids, of all the things to not be excited about.
I know.
Yeah,
Right.
if I would have seen that, you couldn't have torn my eyes away with anything.
Of course not. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you would have been. And I said, do you want me to stop the car so we can get out and look at it? No, let's just keep going.
Well, that's because that craft had an SCP drive
Right, it
built
did.
into it.
Yes, it did. You're right.
Right.
All right. And then I'll make it quick. The sighting I had was at a baseball game where I find myself out in the middle of the field, probably after being abducted, looking up at the sky, realizing that there's something wrong in my current way of perceiving the world. It's like I was in some kind of trance or something. And I can remember it's the same exact feeling I had one time when I passed out from hypotension. I felt like I was underwater and I was trying to get up out of that water. My brain was creating metaphors for what was going on. And finally, it's like, snap out of it, look up. And this time there was serious structure, full daylight. And you can probably find this on MUFON because I did report it. I called it the Sky Train. And that's what it looked like. It looked like multiple craft connected to each other or flying very close to each other. Seems like there was like sort of a kind of sound that it was making. And it just went across the sky and it was not hauling ass. It was going relatively slow.
And nobody else observing it at all.
Nobody else saw it.
You know, the first time you told that story, I had chills go down my spine because if there is literally something that could mess with your perception of reality
Yes.
like that, dear goodness gracious.
Well, that's a very scary thought, though, that there's some way that this thing can look. As far as I know, we don't have any weapons, that could be aimed at you or me or Dave that would take over our minds for a period of time. Now, I'm sure that some of the guys who talked to George Norrie would say that, of course they have those kind of weapons, but I've never seen them.
I also personally, in when it comes to this subject, I will say I am the biggest skeptic. But however, I cannot deny what I have seen, and I remember living in Georgia, where I live. I'm very close to Warner Robins Air Force Base. So it's very easy for me to try to blame something on them.
Mm-hmm.
But however, I was on the lake one evening, and this big object. That's the only way I can say it. And it was kind of like a triangle shape, as Vic was saying, and my first rational explanation, well, it may be something like a stealth bomber or something. But then it was much bigger than that. So I could not argue that fact. But then the lights that were around it, that was not your normal lighting of a aircraft. And the only reason why I say that is I've been in the military, and I've had people, I know enough to be dangerous, so to speak, but I could not explain what the heck this thing was, because it appeared right before my eyes, right above my head. And then about 5 seconds later, it was gone. Mm-hmm. I mean, absolutely no trace. So a bomber, no, they're not going to disappear that quick. But like I said, I'm the biggest skeptic, but I cannot deny what I saw.
It was like a cloaked or something.
Yes. I mean, it was there. I saw it. 5 seconds later, it was gone.
You think it could have sped away?
No trace. I have no idea what happened, but all I know, I was not the only one there. There was 2 other people with me that could verify the story, but it was there, and then all of a sudden, gone. I did not see it leave, but it was gone.
It was gone. See, I don't have any trouble at all.
As far as saying it sped away, I believe I could have saw that.
Mm-hmm.
But this thing just, boom, it was gone. It's kind of like Star Wars. They went into hyperspace all of a sudden.
Later on, in the Anne Rice series of books, she wrote a book called Memnoch the Devil. And I'm going off on a limb here a little bit. There's a great chapter in there where the devil, who is Memnoch, is talking about that he gets very irritated that there are so many names attributed to him when his actual name is Memnoch. Well, we have a genuine religious scholar on the rundown, and that's JJ. And so during episode 17, we also talked a lot about what is the proper name of the devil? Why does God even need an adversary? I mean, these terms, of course, have started off meaning simply accuser or adversary or simple things. Now the devil is a a fully fledged, fleshed out entity that people think of as having some impact in the world.
Well, I think that people don't realize this very well. We have, growing up Christian, this idea of the devil or Lucifer, Satan, whatever name you use, well, that is the opponent to God. He's been around forever, right? And that wasn't always the case.
No,
and
not at
so
all.
the discussion is really fascinating about that idea that, oh, wait a second, we need a devil now. Who's it going to be?
Who are the candidates? All right, let's hit that one.
Speaking of Hebrew Bible, I would like to turn our attention to Belial.
Excellent.
So, Belial, Beliar, or the third version, which happens in the pseudepigrapha, Belior, is really so there were a few early contenders to identify the primary enemy of God. And that is primarily because of the influence of Zoroastrianism upon Judaism during the Great Exile to Babylonia. Because before then, Judaism was nothing but a monotheistic religion. Yeah, what's up, Dave?
Well, so what you mean with that is that prior to this, Judaism didn't feel a need for there to be the anti-God character.
Correct.
Okay. Whereas in Zoroastrianism, it's very, is that what you call dualistic?
It is. It's very, in fact, Zoroastrianism has perhaps the most advanced dualism of any religion. And it's the oldest, or at least it is the religion that has the oldest written texts of any recorded religion that we have. So, and then after Zarathustra came along and completely reformed it, then we had Ahura Mazda, the god of light, opposing Ahriman, the god of darkness. So Judaism began to look for who could be our enemy. And the three kind of names that came up in the beginning was Azazel, Baal-zebub, and Belial. And that is because, there is no, as I've said before, there is no word for demon in the Hebrew Bible except for the word sha'ir, which means like goat-like entity, like a fawn. However, there's a lot of allusions to demons, especially in Psalm 91. You get references to Lilith or Lilith, to the darkness that walks at noon, all this kind of stuff. So allusions more than anything else. And one of the primary allusions that you find is to Belial, because it shows the torrents of Belial, and that is kind of contrasted with the depths of death. I think that's in Hebrews, something like that. I can look it up later. But anyway, in pseudepigraphal texts, if it's not Azazel that is playing the primary evil, and that you find within First Enoch, then it's always Belial that is doing that. And in fact, and then you get a later corruption of that, which is Belial. with an R that ends the word instead of an L. And then you get Belior once in the Testament of Levi. And that may actually be something that is inherited over into Lucifer, because that might be a really bad pun on the idea that it is belly or lightness. So it could have transferred over into Lucifer as, being the evening star. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But you really find this a lot within Qumran, within the Dead Sea Scrolls, because you would have the Mishnah, the leader of the community, who was depicted as the teacher of righteousness, who opposed the Katim, which was the Romans, who was going to overtake the world, that was being led by the teacher of righteousness, opposing figure, which is the wicked priest. And that wicked priest belonged to Belial. It's just fascinating to me. You find this a lot within the Thanksgiving scroll and within the War scroll, but Belial cannot be underestimated in terms of its importance, because during the pseudepigrapha, that was the primary figure to be the ultimate enemy to God.
I have a question, and it's one of those questions that makes me feel like, am I going to sound like a real idiot if I ask this?
No, never. There really are no.
That's my job
when it comes to this.
All right, you were talking about the Jewish faith looking for a bad guy.
Yep.
Okay, that's really what you were saying. They're who's going to be our bad guy?
Yep.
Like the posters at the post office, top 10 wanted criminals, and these particular names rise to the top. What is that based on? I mean, why weren't those names Goofy and Mickey Mouse? And I mean, even though they hadn't been invented at that time, what was it about those particular names that caused the Jewish scholars of the time to focus on them?
I mean, that is a good question as well. So it's the fact that you had no opposing enemy, and suddenly there's this new concept that's being introduced, and it kind of fit with the entire apocalyptic viewpoint that was overtaking Judaism at that time. This idea that, and Paul Hansen, he referred to it as the Shalom Chaos paradigm, where...
That's a good term.
Yeah, I really like that term. He was actually one of my professors at Harvard, and really enjoyed getting to learn underneath him. He was an very intelligent guy. Anyway, he wrote a book called Dawn of the Apocalyptic, and at least the softback cover of that book that I have, it has a really bright pink color to it. I don't know why he chose that color. It always kind of off-put me, but it is what it is. But in that book, what he was saying is that you have this idea that water is chaos, because it's what everything erupted out of. And even when God created the firmament, it pushed back the water, but it never eliminated it. It's always there. And in fact, in like Daniel, the 4 beasts emerge out of the water. The water is always what bursts these horrific evils that are unleashed upon the world. Even Leviathan, of course, comes out of the water. So it makes a lot of sense from that standpoint. But Judaism looked to these names because suddenly there's this new idea that has been injected into the religion. And if there is an enemy of God, then it has to be in our writings somewhere.
Has to be somewhere.
Right. If they, if God truly spoke these words and they are the guiding principles to the nation of Israel, then it couldn't be a complete mystery. And that's why they went searching. Well, there has to be allusions to who this could possibly be. And there are definitely bad figures within the Hebrew Bible. And these were the three that were kind of self-evident. If you have,
but there's only a few, right? I mean, it's not like there's dozens of evil figures in the Hebrew Bible or, even the Christian Bible added on top of it. There's not many named bad actors outside of people.
Now, if you look at it strictly on the surface, you're absolutely right. There's not. I mean, but there are allusions to things. There are destructive forces that are giving animate life, and that they're talked about as if they are actual creatures. And these are the things that the Jews at the time began to cling to. Because if we have Azazel over here and it's requiring sacrifices of goats in the desert Dudael, which all of the bad things live in to begin with, that's a fantastic candidate. We have the torrents of Belial, which, stand in conjunction with the waters of death. That's another fantastic idea right there. Or you have the personific, you have Baal Zebub, or, the Lord of the Flies. The name itself is just so evocative that has to be one of the leading candidates. And these were the three finalists. Now, there were many others. In fact, I did an entire episode on, the proposed enemies of God, and went through some of the litany. And that's actually, I need to finish up the part 2 to that episode, because that's been hanging out there for years now. But yeah, it's fascinating. And most people are completely unaware. They just think that, Satan has been handed down. And then, of course, eventually Satan became an item to that list, even though Satan is not a name, it is a title. So, anyway.
But it's fair to say, right, even though it is a title, it's the accuser, right? I mean, that's basically what you're talking about when you...
Well, in strict legal terms, it is... So first, it's Ha-Satan. It's never Satan. It's Ha-Satan, which is the something. And in this case, it literally means the chief prosecutor.
But it's not a stretch to say that the enemy of God would be the prosecutor of man.
Taken from that perspective, yes, but the linguistics is completely off. It's like,
well, that stuff doesn't matter.
Well, it gets minimized a phenomenal amount. I mean, to the point where we think that, Psalm, 21 is talking about the shadow of, valley of the shadow
23.
of death. 23.
23.
And that's not it whatsoever. Selemoeth, one of my favorite Hebrew words of all time, is a folk etymology that evolved, but really it means the valley of darkest shadow. But yet they got Moeth out of it instead because they mispointed the vowels. And so now it becomes death shadows, which is not a real word in Hebrew.
It's close enough. Death, darkest shadow.
Darkest shadows, right?
I don't know.
I mean,
that shadow that wanted me dead was pretty darn dark. So it does. It does.
Well, the reason that I asked this, and it makes me feel sort of blasphemous and heretical, when I ask these questions, I don't know. Heck, I mean, I guess everybody gets a chance to be blasphemous and heretical occasionally. Oftentimes, these old texts feel like comic books to me, where we need a bad guy. All right, who's a good bad guy? Let's call him Zoom. You know, and I realize that there's history. There are names that have been used in the past, but that name, at least from my understanding, is really just an idea. There's some history behind that name, but nobody can attach any physical reality to that. So I guess I'm just always wondering who were I guess I knew who the authors were. And now I feel like a total idiot, like I just sort of lost the whole train there. But it does. There's always this comic book feel to me when I go through these assignments of the bad guys.
Well, I mean, we've seen these kind of major shifts in religious thought before. Zarathustra represented this within Zoroastrianism. This is like one of the first major shifts in theological perspectives that we have in Judaism. And it's so rarely recognized because it's only been in the last, 50, 60 years in which this idea has really gained traction, that it's because of Zoroastrianism's influence. That was kind of the cause of this new thinking within and the weirdness that erupted out of Second Temple Judaism.
Well, you started this with, I don't know if I can say it. I have to say Belial. Belial? Is that how you pronounced it originally?
Yeah, Belial, Beliar, Belior.
I've always heard Belial, and that may be just me how I've read it too. But what got you thinking about that?
Well, it was a topic that came up.
Oh, was it one of the topics?
Yeah, there's number 4.
Don't mind me.
Or number 5, one of those two.
I'm just here for the cookies. Just as a thought, I think maybe on a roundup, we should have the topic that goes through these transitions of the enemies of God.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's interesting to me, the idea that Belial became this, but how did it change? And what were sort of some of the characteristics of each one over time until we get to Lucifer?
All right. I've got an idea I want to bring up here, and I know this is cheating, but I have a scholar here who can answer questions that I can't answer. Throughout history of all of the named or imagined enemies of God, have there been, at least in that particular philosophical view, enemies of God that were capable of actually damaging God, harming God, killing God?
No.
Has God been vulnerable to any of these things?
Not within the Judeo-Christian belief system. No.
Okay, what about outside that?
So looking to Islam, no.
That's kind of what I thought.
Yeah. I can't think of even in Zoroastrianism, Ahriman never once posed a threat to Ahura Mazda.
Right. These enemies can always damage humans. They can always create chaos on Earth. They can always, I suppose, even create cosmic chaos. But in terms of the God figure ever actually being vulnerable, that doesn't seem to be part of the picture.
Correct.
Okay.
I think you only see that in religions where you have multiple gods, right? And they can kind of act against each other,
knock each other off, or at least tie you to a mountain and have a turkey buzzard come and peck your liver out every day or something like that.
Yeah, or something like that.
However, the interesting thing that started with Zoroastrianism and has been preserved through Christianity and even Mandaism is this idea that, and even Second Temple Judaism, is this idea that the enemy rules the mortal world.
Correct.
That has always been a constant.
All right, so this next clip is a lot of fun about the elevator game, which I had never heard of, and it is such a fascinating concept. It's like the ultimate adventure. Take something as simple and mundane as an elevator, and the outcome is potentially another dimension. Oh, and by the way, you might not make it back. So, oops. But at least you can explore. And then we get into the other games where, you have to sacrifice your teddy bear or other items. And this idea that these games, a lot of them that you get made up, they just don't have happy endings.
No, none of them have happy endings. I'm going to go off track here just a little bit for just a minute. But I was listening to one of the old Art Bell episodes today. It was the one where the original EVP guys were on.
Mm-hmm.
It was Brendan something and Barbara Macbeth. And one of the EVPs was heart-wrenching and said, "Can you help me find my daddy?"
Oh, okay.
And it was very clear. And, it had all the EVP and the EVP characteristics. And I was thinking, what if these aren't dead people? What if these are people who played the elevator game and are still in there? Okay. And since there's a body somewhere, since there's some physical connection to the world, at least at some point, maybe they're the ones doing the EVPs.
Doing the EVPs from another dimension.
And she was on the elevator with her dad, and then, he got off at floor 7, she got off at floor 17. They never came back together.
That's a horrible thought.
Thanks,
JJ,
Nick. Oh, you've got so
way
anytime
to cheer our day up.
Anytime you need something new to feel anxious about, just contact Vic Hermanson. He'll help you. All right,
okay,
let's
now in here I do actually give an account of exactly how the elevator game is played and in what order. So if you don't want to get lost in another dimension and be an EVP, don't do it that way. Just skip that level 5, don't get off on 10, whatever it is.
All right, elevator game time.
The elevator game.
Oh, I love the elevator game.
The elevator game. All right, so I got one.
We have a winner. Is this the game where you run into the elevator when there's people on it and you hit every floor and then you run back out?
No, that's the get your ass kick game.
You get on the elevator and no one's on it, and you fart the worst fart you can possibly have, and then you pray to God no one gets on until you get off. No. The elevator game is one of these really fascinating modern urban legends that came out of Asia, I think Japan specifically, where you get on and there is a specific sequence of numbers that you have to hit on the elevator keypad, where you go up and then down, up and then down, up and then down. And if you do it right, then the very the floor that you were taken to is nowhere on the keypad and instead becomes an opening into hell.
Or some, I mean, I
nebulous place.
Seems to me like I've heard different rules from different places, but JJ's right. It's always a matter of go through a particular sequence in the elevator, and then at the end, you'll find yourself at the gateway to hell, or in some alternate dimension, or some alternate reality, or something.
In fact, one of the episodes of Evil featured the elevator game.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man, I still haven't watched season 3 on that.
It's good. It actually is really, really good.
So what happened in the episode?
So the I forget his name. The Muslim researcher that's on the team. He is told about this game and becomes insanely curious about it. And there's a puzzle because there's no, like, he's supposed to hit one floor number and the elevator did not have it. And then he realized if he pushed a combination of numbers that would equal that floor.
Equal that. Nice.
And then suddenly the doors opened up and he was in, it looked like a basement, but there was no light whatsoever. It kind of reminded me of a traditional depiction of Sheol.
Mm-hmm.
And he walks out, the doors close, and he's trapped there. He's trapped there for days. And then a demon begins to visit him and attempting to torment him and lure him away deeper into the darkness. And I won't spoil how it ends up, but it was actually really well done. I was impressed.
Well, that would be impressive. The thing that amazes me about stuff like the elevator game was there was a time. When did I first start noticing this? Sometime I'd say probably mid 1990s or so. And there seemed to be a change in the way that younger minds functioned. And what you would see is you would see something on Facebook where the post was, here's a picture of a kitten, click on it 3 times, turn around, go through these little rituals based on this, and you'll, the name of your future husband will be revealed. If you don't do these things, your mother will die.
Yep.
Or now this kind of thing seems to have kind of faded away. I don't remember seeing stuff like this recently, but I know there must have been thousands of people jacking with elevators all over the world.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's just like, so when we were growing up, we had the Bloody Mary, Candyman, Bell Witch story where you would stand in front of a darkened mirror and say some command word several times, and then you would have that appear in front of you, right? And you get progressions of that. Elevator game is a permeation of that. Some of my favorite are the Japanese game of hide and seek by yourself.
Okay, who finds you?
It's something that you don't want to find.
That's kind of what I was thinking. There's some, what do you call them, yokai, or there's some monster out there waiting to find you.
Yeah. So what you do is you have to turn on a TV to a channel that has nothing but static on it.
Okay.
And then you take a stuffed animal, a Nagumi, and you open up its belly, take out the stuffing. You put in...
You got to sacrifice your teddy bear?
Yeah. And then you take your fingernail clippings, you put it inside the cavity, you sew it up the belly with red string. You then fill the sink with water, and you put the bear into the water.
All right, so you've performed unnecessary surgery on your teddy bear, and now you've drowned the teddy bear.
Correct.
Okay.
All good magic requires a sacrifice.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
true. But we have a double one here.
And then you tell it, and then you begin to play hide and seek with the bear being it. You run and hide, and if it finds you, you're either dead or it drags you to hell.
Okay.
Is there a way to win this game?
Supposedly, but that is the weird thing about all of these games. It is rarely is there ever a positive benefit. It's
there's never an upside to this thing.
Yeah, you live, and that's about it. However,
that's not a winning.
The negative consequences far outweigh anything that
That's where you
could ever
started.
get out of it. Exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to read this. I found this site about how to play the elevator game. Now let's pick this apart for a moment.
We will deconstruct the elevator
All
game.
right. Step 1. All right, you're the player. You enter an elevator alone or with another player, but no outsider can enter the elevator with you, nor can you leave at any point. If you do exit the elevator, you got to start over. Okay, well, that means there's a way out, so that's not too bad so far.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you ride the elevator from floor to floor in a specific sequence. I'm not going to mention the sequence. All right, so now remember, do not get off on any of the floors. And then it says when you get to the 5th floor, if you encounter a mysterious woman, do not, in caps, look at her and do not answer or interact with her in any way. The consequences of engaging with her are said to include the possibility of never returning to the real world. Okay.
But that's like the slit mouth woman. Just ignore her. You just ignore her.
Right. Just ignore her. Don't look at her. Don't engage.
In the case of her, that doesn't help you.
That doesn't work. Yeah, you got to confuse her.
All right.
Confuse her or throw cinnamon.
Or cinnamon, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Step 4. Now push the button to descend from the 5th floor to the 1st. And here's where they say things could get crazy. If the elevator operates normally and takes you to the 1st floor, exit immediately and do not look back or talk to anyone. But if instead of taking you from the 5th floor to the 1st floor, the elevator begins to go up, well, congratulations. You're being allowed into another world, or so they say. Alternatively, you might resist the urge, freak out, and instead simply press the emergency button and wait for the fire department to arrive for help. So what it doesn't give is, let's say it takes you to another world and you step out of the elevator into this other world. That's awesome. How the hell do you get back?
How do you get back?
I mean, is it suggesting the elevator will never close until you get back in it? I don't like games without a way back. That doesn't sound good to me.
Well,
but boy, it would be tempting to do this in an empty building at night and at least get to the point to where you see if the woman walks in when you hit the 5th floor.
Is there a minimum size building that you have to do this in?
It's got to have 10 floors.
It's got to have 10 floors.
Yep.
Lots of buildings like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I love stuff like this. But there's benefit at the end, right? It's not like you just get to live if you win. Otherwise, all the bets are off and you die. The idea of going to another world, another dimension, a portal to another plane, I don't know. That's interesting, but I want to come back.
I wonder who came up with this.
I don't know, but they're probably laughing their ass off right now. Suckers. We got another one.
Well, look, there's got to be YouTube videos of people playing the elevator game.
Oh, I'm sure that they're.
I'm sure. Some of them real, some of them faked.
And if they were doing it right, they'd find some really weird looking woman to stand on the 5th floor.
That's right.
Accurate.
You'll sometimes hear me refer to myself as the token Protestant of the group. And most of the other guys are Catholic, and I grew up Protestant. I kind of straddle the two in my current beliefs. But there are definitely some things that I believe that the Catholics have that we're missing in the Protestant church. And as we get into season 1, episode 18, we have a discussion about the Apocrypha, and which are books that Martin Luther removed from the Bible. And the Catholics didn't add them. Protestants removed them. But we go specifically into the Book of Tobit, and this is a great example of what's missing. This book is full of concepts and ideas around the effects that demons can have in your life, and ideas on fighting them. And it's a real shame that it's missing out of any typical scripture that you pick up in a Protestant church. So as you listen to this discussion, put yourself in that mindset. There are things in the Catholic tradition, scripture, teachings that we should at least understand and know about. This would be one of them. As a Protestant, I had never even heard of the Apocrypha growing up, right? It was never on my radar, right? And so I purchased a Bible with the Apocrypha in it, and I've read about half of it at this point. But the first book I read was Tobit, and it was a fascinating book. I've yet to see anything in there that is super crazy controversial as to why they wanted to remove it. It does not make sense to me. Tobit's fascinating because you actually have one of the bigger stories of a demon having agency in the Bible. You don't have that hardly anywhere else, right? You have demons mentioned and they're cast out, but an active, ongoing oppression of a person, it was very, very interesting in Tobit. And I don't know why they would want to remove that.
Well, to me, the Book of Tobit is one of the most. You see, this is the point that I was going to get to a while ago before I went down with Alice. But the Book of Tobit is one of the greatest books, in my opinion, of grace that I've ever read. I mean, it is, just like you said, we have glimpses of God's providence throughout all of the quote-unquote 66 books of the Protestant Bible.
Father Mike, because we have a pretty broad audience of people, can you give the 1 minute Cliff Notes overview of Tobit?
Oh, Lord.
If you can't, then I can get Avalon to do that.
Well, Avalon can do it, or Josh can do it.
Or Josh can do it, okay.
Yeah. Let me pass you to Josh. But at any rate, before we go there, let me give this 30 seconds. Because the Protestant world would have you believe from the last verse of Malachi to the first verse of Matthew that God was silent for 500 years. He was not silent. And that's where the Apocrypha comes in, especially Tobit and Maccabees and all the other books. But anyway, here's Josh.
So the Book of Tobit is one of my favorite books. But the first part of Tobit has to deal with funeral rites, almost in a sense. which was kind of led up into some of the events in it. But it has to deal with the Archangel Raphael coming down and meeting with Tobias and traveling with him. And there's a lot of healing that goes on. There's a healing of the family that he's eventually joined with. But there's also a healing of his father who was blind as well. And as we know, Archangel Raphael is the angel of, the healing of God.
Mm-hmm. Now, is Tobit the only place that Raphael is mentioned in the Bible by name?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I'm going to have to defer to Josh on that because I don't know.
So what I remember from Tobit was the so the story revolves around this woman, right? To a certain extent.
Yes.
Who is oppressed. Everyone she is to marry dies. 7
suitors, and they all died.
Right.
Oh, really?
Because of the demon Asmodeus.
Yeah, Asmodeus is killing off every possible husband that she could have. And so here you've got a demon actively oppressing someone. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing about that is, from an oppression standpoint, you've actually got people dying as a result of that demon. And people like to think that, oppression can just mean some scratches and some sleepless nights. But, bad things can happen.
He's oppressing the sacrament of marriage as well.
Yes. And so you've got that aspect of it. You've got an angel coming down and taking the form of, what was it, her cousin? Or was it Tobias's cousin? I forget the...
No, it was... he just took the form of a man and became a traveling companion for Tobias.
Yeah, but here's an angel taking the form of a person and stepping in that role, pretending to be someone that they knew, which that's unusual, right? I mean, the only time I think you see that happening in other books of the Bible is way back. What was it, the 3 travelers on the road with... oh,
yeah.
Was it Abraham?
Yes. Abraham and Sarah, when the 3 travelers came, and that's when Sarah laughed because they told Sarah that she was going to have a child.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I can't offhand think of any other instances where angels are actively pretending to be people throughout a narrative. Usually they're just enacting God's wrath. But then, and maybe this would be part of the reason they would want to remove it, but then you've got the whole fish guts solution, which is
the gall in the heart of a fish. Yeah.
Right. Creating a actual... what would you call it? Poultice or whatever, a way, to cure, to exorcise the demon out of her life, and so that she could get married to the guy in there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot that happens in that book. It is a fascinating book, and it is a very active book from a demonology standpoint and angelology standpoint. Yeah. And so removing it from the Bible, I think, is very, very detrimental. Yeah. I think it removes a lot of active, what you would call interaction from God in people's lives.
Yeah. Well, it also shows how incense takes a role in exorcism as well, because when Raphael told him about it, he said to make an incense with it, to burn it in the room.
That's right, not a poultice. That's right. It was an incense. Yep.
And then it would drive the demon away.
Yep. So it's a fascinating book. But when you look at that, All right, so the Apocrypha gets removed. So far, I haven't seen any really contradictory things to most Protestant beliefs that are in those books. And so I don't see value in removing them, and I think that it's a mistake. Those books have been in there. It's funny, from a Protestant side, people go, oh, well, those Catholics added a bunch of books that aren't in the Bible, when the reality is the Protestants removed the books.
The Protestants removed them.
They were always in the Bible. Yeah,
it was after Martin Luther did the 95 Theses, and like he did some good things, did some bad things. But what he did when he was retranslating the Bible, he took those books out for quote unquote redundancy, and also because it didn't fit his personal theology of faith alone.
Yeah.
He also tried to remove the Book of James, but couldn't find a good enough reason to. And there's even a statement that's recorded where he says that he wishes he could have chunked Jimmy, a nickname for James, into the fire.
Really? I did not know that. What was the animus against the Book of James? What did he find?
The animacy that he had against the Book of James is Luther. I mean, which we all know that salvation is a free gift, right? And but James would remind us that faith without works is dead, right? And what that means is our faith not being active in our life is worthless. That's what James is saying. But see, Luther took offense to that because he's faith alone. And we don't have to have any works. Well, you know what? Here's the deal, Martin, and don't get me wrong. I am pro Martin. I like a lot of the stuff that he did. Was he right in every aspect? No, but who is? But when you think of the verse, faith without works is dead, salvation is a free gift. Salvation can be given to David, okay? Without question.
I hope.
But see, David has a part in that is action. And that action, David, is you have to receive it. Mm-hmm. Think about that. So faith without works, faith without receiving is walking dead in faith. And see, that's even, I could tell you God loves you, right? That's faith. God loves you. All right, but you even have a part in that as well, David. And see, this is it. You have to allow God to love you for it to become effective in your life.
Right.
See what I'm saying? So in other words, faith without works is dead. And see,
well, I don't think that's the way they typically view it, right? So they view faith without works as if you are not actively going out and doing the good that is, promoted in the Bible,
yes,
especially in the New Testament, then you are not going to make it to heaven. And I don't think that that's the reality.
No, that is not the reality. But what is the reality of that whole statement, and people took it too far. What James is making reference to when he says faith without works is dead, he is backing up the words of Christ that says we will be known by our fruit.
Correct. So
our faith in our works is our faith in Christ in receiving that new covenantal relationship with God, but yet that fruit of that relationship showing in our lives. Thus, and hence the reason why I said that, number one, salvation is a free gift, but you have to receive it.
So without going too far down a rabbit hole,
okay,
I'll just make this statement from a Protestant standpoint. And you know, this is anyway. John MacArthur talks about this a lot. When you are talking about faith and works, his perspective is the works will come with the faith.
Yes.
Okay. But the works are not required for salvation.
Correct. The works.
And what we view the Catholic perspective is salvation cannot come without the works.
What the Catholic view is, what the Roman Catholic view is, and is their stance on that is true salvation. What was the key word I just said?
True.
True salvation.
Right.
Will become evident with fruit. They're not talking about you got to work your ass off to gain salvation, okay? The whole stance on that, and the whole stance of even the church fathers, is this: true salvation will be backed up with fruit or by your works. Or, as Vic and JJ and even you will understand this, that's why we repent every Lord's Day of our
sins,
thought, our word, and our deed.
Right.
Because we fail in that. However, we repent of that, and that repentance therefore shows our fruit of salvation. So that's the whole the Roman Catholic Church. They're not saying that you got to go out and be a missionary and save 1,000 folks every day and blah 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 and hope you make it to heaven. Okay, they're not saying that. They're well, shut up, Mike. The whole thing is your fruit will show forth true salvation. And that's what it boils down to. That's all.
I've had some experience with tarot cards, not using them, but having them used by a girlfriend who decided she really wanted to get rid of me, and she needed some justification. And the tarot cards proved to her that I was the, Knave of Cups or something. And that since she was some other symbol in the tarot cards, that she had a moral imperative to get rid of me. She probably did, but I don't really think the tarot cards were necessary.
That's a new one for me. Dumped by reason of tarot.
Dumped by reason of tarot cards. Well, listen, I mean, I'm a walking collection of character flaws and, all kinds of oddities. So I don't think she really even needed the tarot cards. But we had an episode where we spent a lot of time talking about tarot cards. And what were the other cards? Konxari?
Konxari cards, which are sort of cards used to ask questions of spirits. Not as much divination as more of an investigation technique. They're really kind of cool.
So it's a Ouija board without the need for a planchette. With a limited number of answers.
Something like that. Limited number of answers, sure.
Limited number of answers. So anyway, I don't think any of the gang of nerds is spending any of their life trying to figure out the future or trying to consult with the spirits. Our belief systems, I think, are universally, bad idea. Don't do that.
Agreed. And I have a hard enough time dealing with the present. So.
I do too. So, but anyway, we had a really interesting conversation about this. I think JJ was at his best. So let's get to the Konxari cards.
Oh, I wanted to talk about tarot cards.
Oh, you want to talk about tarot cards?
Yeah, that was another topic on that list.
Yeah, sure. Grab it. Grab it. Go with it. I don't know a lot about tarot cards. I mean, I can remember an experience in Houston when a stoner buddy of mine came to me and said, "Hey, listen, I know you got some. I know you got some things you're going through. I got these cards here, and I can do a tarot reading on you, and I can tell you which way you need to go. And this was the guy who spent every dime of disposable income he had on weed. If he got paid and paid his bills and got some groceries and he had 19 cents left, he'd buy weed with it. If he had $1,900, he would buy weed with it. Weed was the most important thing in his life. And he was a tarot expert, or a self-proclaimed tarot expert. And I don't remember ever getting anything very valuable out of that. But maybe your experience is different, Dave.
Well, I don't use tarot cards. I've been around them. I've had readings done years ago just for entertainment purposes. But I'm assuming you guys are somewhat familiar with tarot cards, right? You've got
Oh yeah.
I think they're kind of cool. I mean, there's the what is it, wands and cups, and you've got the
swords and all that.
You've got the hanged man, and you've got I mean, they're pretty cool.
So we've had multiple discussions recently on divination. We've talked about dowsing and other forms of divination. So I'm curious how you guys think tarot cards work, because there are a lot of people that pay a lot of money to have tarot readings done. And you have these patterns that you lay out the cards, and they're supposed to tell you something. And there's a whole lot of cards now beyond tarot. You have oracle cards. I'll have to pull it out. I actually have another type of cards that are meant for spirit communication. But the fascinating thing to me is, in the end, you're shuffling a deck of cards. The cards are going to turn up the way they're going to turn up.
Correct.
Exactly. And
well, you asked the question, what do I feel about it?
Right.
I can make it very simple.
Yeah.
It is either utter, complete horse crap, or it is one of these days, I'm going to hurt Father Birdsong. Okay, so let's go again. It is either utter, complete horse crap or evil. And almost always utter, complete horse crap. It's the same as kids just sitting around, making guesses. If there is really something bringing genuine information to the table, it shouldn't be doing that. And you shouldn't be participating in it.
I'm going to say the answer to what you just said for both of them. I'm going to say yes. It's utter complete
horse crap.
Yes. And evil. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Evil.
The act itself is evil, but if you're getting anything really meaningful out of it, if there's anything that's bringing you real information,
compare that with the Ouija board.
Right.
That's what I was going to say. Tarot to me that's another type of doorway that you should not be opening. But I do have a funny story about them, though.
Oh, good. We need some funny stories.
So I had just come home from high school, and I am not the most popular of ladies' men. I'll put it that way. But there was
because I am.
I'm not sorry. I met my wife.
And I think Dave is. I think Dave is probably too. But
no.
But there was this one girl in high school that essentially stalked me. She really liked me. I did not feel this way about her.
Sad how that works.
But I came home from an all-male college for the summer. I was bored. I was lonely. And she kept pestering me for a date because she started working at the same place that I did over the summer. And I went, okay, fine. And so I had just bought a pack of tarot cards, and I brought them with me. I thought, hey, this would be at least some time to kill, right? I get there, we watch a movie, and then I bust out the tarot cards. and I start doing a reading, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm just following the little instruction book that came with the cards. And I'm not even thinking about what I'm saying. I'm just, oh, it's this card. This is the explanation for it. This card, this is the explanation. Until I realize when I have finished talking, I have essentially fated us to be lost soulmates from across the eons. And I was like, oh my holy freaking God. No. This is not what I meant to go. And I quickly left because, I mean, and I still believe in this. I do not believe in like true physical intimacy unless you are just, you know, you're committed. You want this to last for a long time. And I'm like, after what? Nope, no more of this crap. And I got the hell out. I beat it out of Dodge. But
and then he married her 3 years later.
I did not. No.
This was Netflix and divination.
Essentially, yeah, you're right. Although it's more Blockbuster and divination.
Or Blockbuster and divination.
Well, here's the thing. So this is one that I do fully put in the realm of divination, right? Well, we talked about dowsing. I think there's some question, right? It's more of a gray area depending on how you're using the dowsing and what's going on there. But tarot cards to me, 100% in the divination, because it's being used almost always to tell the future, right? You are trying to find out what is something you should be doing, what is the state of your life, what is the state of your future, right? And the question becomes, how does that work? So I have this deck that's called Konxari. Konxari cards. It's actually a beautiful deck. It was designed by Paul Michael Kane, guy we investigated with a couple of times. He's a graphic artist, but he put this deck together, and they're all Konxari. He didn't design Konxari, he just designed the deck. But they have cards like, you know, Karma. It's got a skull on it. It's got a cellar. It's got light. They're all descriptive things, and the idea is that you mix up the deck and you lay it out, and you ask the spirit to interact with it, and then you use what's on the face of the card to try to interact with the spirit. The spirit's trying to tell you something. And, you know, maybe it died, you know, the spirit died in the cellar with the candlestick, you know, and it was General Custard. I don't know. So when I started doing this, I'm like, you know, how is this worked? Is the spirit supposed to be directing the way that the cards get shuffled?
Yeah.
Is it supposed to be changing the face of the card before you flip it over? You know, that's sort of a weird thought.
Well, it's kind of the same point that JJ and I was talking about in the beginning. It's just like trying to use a Ouija board, and regardless of what card pops up, the human psyche is going to look at that and make some sort of conclusion or decision on. I don't care if the card shows you in the bathroom taking a whatever. I mean,
an interesting thing for a spirit to do, but yes.
But seriously, that's how it works. But, you know,
the Konxari cards are a little more interesting in that I think there's less interpretation, because, I mean, maybe there's some interpretation. It's no different than an obelisk. You get back words and you try to apply them to the situation. Tarot cards, on the other hand, who's reading the cards makes a huge difference, because they are interpreting. It's the interpretation of the cards that is the divination itself.
Well, I've never played it, so I'm not the expert, or even I shouldn't even be talking about it.
You're not a tarot professional. You don't have a big tarot light outside your house that blinks.
I know about tarot cards, but I've never done what I'm about to say. But Josh does it. Think about playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
You have an interpreter that is going to read this next card, so to say, or what's the other cards? Yu-Gi-Oh something. Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
Yu-Gi-Oh is a set of cards, but it's a math game.
I mean, exactly.
But they're prescriptive.
But what I'm saying is it's someone interpreting whatever the card is saying. And so when it comes to tarot cards, here's what I'm trying to say, Vic. If the death card comes up, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's up to someone's interpretation.
Right, and they'll almost tell you it doesn't mean physical death. It means death of something in your life, death. And so that is exactly. So first of all, that's where, Vic, as the super sensitive, cold reader of people, could take those cards and absolutely spin a yarn that would twist somebody's life into a knot, and they'd go, you know so much about me. You're so accurate with this. But it's also where someone who is, we'll say psychic, is able to gather information from, quote, spirit, and tell something based on the way the cards are set up. My mom has had readings done before out in California with psychics, and the most accurate, if I remember, story she told me a long time ago, one of the most accurate people used a deck of playing cards.
Mm-hmm.
Not tarot cards.
Just regular cards.
Plain old playing cards. And it meant something to her. It wasn't the woman doing the reading. It wasn't that the ace of spades meant something specific. In that moment, as she's reading the cards, it was almost like an automatic activity, almost like automatic writing, right? Where something was happening from a psychic standpoint as she's going through the cards. It was just a mechanism. It was a tool to let her get in touch with the psychic impressions that she would get in doing the reading.
An organizing or focusing device.
Yes, exactly.
One of my favorite shows that was in the peak HBO era was the show Bullshit, starring Penn and Teller.
I love Penn and Teller.
I love Penn and Teller too. They are, Penn is a very, 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 very serious, very, very thoughtful atheist.
Oh yeah,
yeah, very, very thoughtful atheist, and he can be a little, I don't know, blasphemous occasionally, but he's funny when he is.
Well, blasphemy is often the cause of much humor.
Yeah, and what's it he says? Christ on a popsicle stick, or something like that. But anyway, one of his shows, he's talking about, the ways that people use the supernatural world to try to control and direct their lives. And the quote he came up with was, Everybody got a gree-gree. And a gree-gree is your dust or your talisman or your blessed necklace or whatever you carry around, or just your view of the world. But everybody's got something they use to try and gain some power over the randomness of the world.
Okay, see, now this is the benefit of listening to us talk about these episodes and these clips, because you never explained the origin of that phrase in the episode. So that came from Penn and Teller, huh?
Yeah, everybody got a gree-gree.
Cool.
Came from Penn and Teller. And then the, what I consider to be a really good show, Supernatural.
Oh, yeah.
Sam and Dean. I think it's an excellent show. But they are trying to get away from the hellhounds. And so they go find a hoodoo guy, and he says, "We need some Goofer Dust." And Sam says, or Dean says, "What's Goofer Dust?" He said, "You guys are hunters and you don't know what Goofer Dust is?" So we had a good clip concerning Gree-Grees, Goofer Dust, other things that we use for protection against the paranormal.
But most importantly, it ends with JJ holding little chicken feet, flying through the air. That, that is paranormal rundown gold right there.
Well, there's we should probably revisit that sometime. Maybe
I think we hit it pretty hard.
No, I think we could even do it with sound effects, put in some choo, 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 choo.
Yeah, I like it.
Chicken feet.
I like it.
Okay. All right. See, look, this episode's coming to an end. We're both a bit punch drunk, so please forgive that.
Well, Vic, with you growing up in Louisiana, I'm not surprised that you don't have a bit of wisdom on this.
Well, I got myself a mojo hand.
I mean,
I really don't.
I mean, especially with. Yeah,
I can remember being around people. Oh no! Look, I've been around the older people. And it's pretty much like the movies. I mean, everybody got a gree-gree. That's the term. Everybody got a gree-gree. And
what does that mean?
Everybody got a gree-gree. It means everybody's got some little amulet or talisman or something that they use to try to control the world. Everybody got a gree-gree. That's what they say. Everybody got a gree-gree. I've been around people who talked about voodoo. I've been around people who talked about... I've seen both chicken and pig sacrifices where some old lady would go out there and chop the head off a chicken, open the chicken up, dump the chicken out, have all of the various chicken entrails on the porch of the home, which really made me happy, and would then tell you what was happening based upon the entrails of the chicken there on the porch.
Wow.
And I have no idea if she was gaining any meaningful knowledge from that at all. But she thought she was, and many of the people around her thought that she was.
It's no different than reading tea leaves or rolling bones, knuckle bones.
It's a little messier.
Yeah, a little smellier. Yeah, fair.
JJ, what about you growing up in the foothills of the Appalachians?
Nope.
Okay, so apparently now women are very happy when they get a dress that has pockets. That's apparently a big thing these days, pockets. Well, all these little ladies back in the swamps of Louisiana, their dresses already had pockets, and they kept stuff in them. And in her pocket would have been a chicken foot, or I guess a rooster foot, with the claws and
had the claw, right?
Had the claws and had the claw and all that kind of stuff. And somebody would have wrapped gold wire around it, and there'd be some kind of hex bag with goofer dust, or there really was this stuff.
Goofer dust.
Goofer.
Nice.
That's really
Hold on. What in the world is goofer dust?
Thank you for asking. I just didn't.
Well,
I had to, man.
Goofer dust.
Well, look, I'm just going to go back to Supernatural. Dean asks, "What the heck's goofer dust?" And this guy who's being stalked by devil dogs or hellhounds said, "You think you know something about the paranormal world? You don't know what goofer dust is?" Goofer dust is a traditional hexing material and practice of the Black American tradition of hoodoo from the southern United States. It has, so it's hoodoo stuff.
You can get a pouch of it on Amazon for $4.99 from Madame Yaya's.
What a deal. Okay.
Madam Yaya's Goofer Dust.
All right. So
I'm sorry, but I can't get away from what JJ said. Madam's Goober Dust.
So she whips out her.
Look, if this guy had been being an ass to this woman, she would have whipped out this rooster claw that she had been carrying this thing around for years and years and years. It was a well-worn rooster claw, and it really did have a hex bag at the end. And I can remember asking, "What's in there?" "Oh, that's Goofer Dust, child." And there's Goofer Dust in there. You're a good boy. You don't need to worry about that. Goofer Dust. And she would have done something like, I don't have a claw here handy. But she would have done something like, hold this thing up to him and say something like, "Get thee away from me." And she would have had that thing pointing at his face, and she would have had a look on her face like, "If you don't get thee away from me, thee are going to have some problems.
Something's going to fall off."
And I mean, if you guys think I'm lying here or joking, I mean, I'm not.
No, I totally believe it.
She would, and nobody who knew that woman would have ever jacked with her in any way. And, let's say her name was, Mrs. Markham. And they were all something like Mrs. Markham or something, and, or Mrs. Delacroix. I like that better. Mrs. Delacroix. They would come over there and say, "Mrs. Delacroix, would you like some help picking your pecan trees? Mrs. Delacroix, do you need somebody to fix your window? Mrs. Delacroix, is there something wrong with your door?" They wanted to be in her good graces.
Oh, I bet.
They wanted to be in
I would too.
Hello. Yeah,
They didn't want the Goofer Dust treatment.
That's right.
Hey, all I know about chicken feet is that they made the absolute best spaceships when I was a kid.
Wait. All right, this is a really weird rundown, but
I am trying to visualize this.
But no, look, I think we've got a title though. Chicken feet make the best spaceships.
Oh, I like it. Yes.
All right, but I got to hear about chicken feet spaceships.
I like the humorous tint this is taking.
This is great.
So growing up, we raised chickens. We raised a lot of chickens.
Uh-huh.
And, I have seen my fair share of beheadings that would take place of chickens because they would then
it's great entertainment.
Dinner.
I'm sorry. I know that we're going to make somebody mad, but the day that you behead several chickens, that's an entertainment day.
Oh, it is. And I've done it. I mean, I've, plucked the feathers. I've dunked their bodies into hot water and plucked the feathers off from them. But anyway, after you chop the head off, they stop running around, blood spurting everywhere. Then, and you then defeather them, you cut the feet off. And they would give them to me. And so the claws section would be the thrusters for the spaceship, and then the part that was cut off, that is then the helm of the spaceship, and that's what would go flying through space. And it was awesome. I love that. Still have many a fond memory of playing in the dirt with chicken feet.
People just don't understand it growing up with their electronics today, the things we had to do to entertain ourselves.
But there was never a point when we weren't entertained.
This is very true. Very true. Now I've just got an image of JJ sitting in the dirt. Shh. One chicken foot fighting the other.
Oh, gosh, y'all killing me.
Here comes the SS Chicken Foot.
The SS.
But now I have learned that the greatest thing that makes spaceships are remote controls.
That's because you get angry with them and throw them across the room.
Hello.
Accurate.
Well, there's probably a clip that has not defined the paranormal rundown more than the next one. We refer back to this topic on a regular basis. Not my intent, but the guys always bring it up. These
That's JJ.
stupid rabbits. Can't get rid of them. Now they come up in just random topics, not even related to this. Rabbits show, and of course, you got the ultimate catchphrase. Oh, now let's go down this rabbit hole. It has totally, completely different meaning after you listen to this one. So, without further ado, make sure no young children are in the room and listen to the Paranormal Rundown take on rabbits.
I will tell you, I am going to answer the rabbit question. The reason that I have the hang on, let me go back to the rundown list, which is actually getting to be more than just a list. I've started to put a lot of little pieces of information about many of these topics.
The only thing I know is they made a lot and they taste good fried.
Woman who gave birth to rabbits. Her name was Mary Toft, and she lived in the 18th century. And the topic is in there because of my fascination with intellectual arrogance.
Okay.
All of you know somebody who's intellectually arrogant, who just is absolutely certain they know all kinds of things, even if they don't know all kinds of things. Mary Toft was a woman. Hey, this is the rundown. We're adults. I guess I should give an audience warning, trigger warning. I'm going to talk about adult topics. Who was endowed from birth with an extremely capacious vagina. And she found that she could place rabbits.
Shot who?
She could place rabbits in her vagina, little baby rabbits.
Wow,
And-
it's almost like Richard Gere with the goat.
Well, yeah, but
Boy, this took a turn that I did not expect. Okay.
She must be on that Gopher Dust.
Keep going, Vic. Just keep going. Okay.
Look at Dave.
This is what I needed tonight. I'm telling you. I can just imagine a woman furiously shoving a kicking
Okay.
rabbit.
Come on. Go forever. We're not going to be able to publish this.
she could have a personal record chart on the wall. 1, 2, 7, 22.
Poor Peter Cottontail.
Father Bert. All right. So
This week in our Easter episode,
How to dilate more than 10.
okay. So anyway, in the 18th century,
Water broke.
she would make it clear that she was pregnant, and she would probably wear some kind of pillow or something under her skirt or her dress, and so the community would be expecting her to have a baby at some point. And it's, midwives and doctors, there were people like that, and they would come and she would give birth to rabbits. And they would spread the story of the wonder of the woman who gave birth to rabbits far across the land. And of course, people would come and say, I want to see the woman who gave birth to rabbits. Oh yeah, of course, that's 5 shillings. And so she could make money off having given birth to rabbits. Now, here's the thing. Apparently, of all the midwives and all the physicians who saw her, nobody said, it just doesn't seem right that somebody's giving birth to rabbits. So I wonder what's really going on here. So the story, first off, is one of a woman with unusual anatomy, also with kind of some chutzpah in terms of how she could fool people, and also physicians, highly educated people who were easily fooled.
And apparently she didn't have a whole lot else going on in life that she discovered she had this particular talent.
I have so many questions, and none of them are appropriate for this show.
Well, listen,
But see-
you realize,
JJ just brought this up.
I've given you the limit of my knowledge here. I mean,
but see, JJ just asked a good question.
yes.
What do you? I can. I can just imagine sitting at home one day. How many rabbits can I stuff inside me? I mean,
Talk about
really?
basting. Sorry,
Oh, man.
Time to hit F9, Vic.
I got to walk away on that one for just a second.
No. We've got to finish it. I mean, there's a lot written about this. I mean, this actually would make a pretty good TTT episode. Yeah, yep. This is a good TTT episode or triple T episode. And some of the I got to send you this picture. Hang on.
Wait, you're telling me there's a lot of documentation about this out there on the internet?
Lot of documentation about this. And I am right now in the Paranormal Rundown. I'm going to put a picture up here. And I want everybody to give me their thoughts about it.
Sorry, guys, I was having a hot flash.
You see the rabbits?
Yes, I see the rabbits.
And you notice they come out lively and ready to go.
I would say those rabbits look spunky.
Yeah.
They look, and that brings up a whole set of questions. But again,
Look, JJ knows everything in the world there is to know about
Basting rabbits.
Ethiopic languages and Semitic languages and Second Temple Judaism. Look, I'm going to match my knowledge of weird, ridiculous, totally useless things with JJ's Second Temple Judaism knowledge any day of the week. So this is not. Go ahead.
That comment JJ made was freaking priceless. Basting rabbits.
Basting rabbits. So anyway, there is a topic in here though, and that is how easily highly educated people are fooled.
Mm-hmm.
okay.
So
I don't see how any doctor worth his name on a piece of paper could be fooled by this.
I don't know.
I mean,
who said that they were worth their name, having their name on a piece of paper?
fair enough. Yeah.
And it could be that they were kind of like, okay, well, this means there are going to be a whole lot of people coming to town. That's a lot of money. I can make some more money because of this.
Well, I just watched a series, guys, talking about any doctor worth their name on a piece of paper and stuff. And it's supposedly supposed to be a true series. I guess that's a relative term there. But it was called The Good Doctor.
Are you talking about Dr. Death?
Dr. Death, that's it.
Is this
I thought you said The Good Doctor. That's completely different.
There are several Dr. Death things.
I was thinking of The Good Nurse, but yeah, this was Dr. Death.
Yeah, there are several Dr. Death things out there right now. One of them is about
This was about an orthopedic surgeon.
quote unquote neurosurgeon in Dallas.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay, so look, that's a really good point. Okay, in that this guy was not just kind of unqualified, he was exceedingly unqualified. And he was
Grossly unqualified.
I mean, he was essentially doing things like, well, I mean, Dave, it would not be outside the realm of possibility in the last years for you have had to have neck surgery.
Right.
And that's what scares.
Absolutely.
Yes.
No, I had it offered at one point.
Yes, that would not have been out.
Yeah.
Right.
When I watched that, yeah.
Well, I mean, so they have different surgeons. They have access surgeons. Okay, so neurosurgeons don't necessarily know all of the anatomy perfectly at the front of the neck. There's a lot of stuff in there that you don't want to mess up.
Yes.
A lot of stuff in there. Their job is to go in and to do that laminectomy, to take that disc out, to fuse those.
to fuse those vertebrae, to do something very, very specific and skill-based in there.
When Sonia had her surgery, she had the same. She had, I think C3 and C4 replaced.
Right. Well, they can't replace them, but they can fuse them.
They put in some kind of synthetic disc.
Okay, they put a synthetic disc in. Okay, so she had really high tech stuff done. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's a complicated surgery.
Yeah, that's very high tech.
Oh yeah. I mean, the guy that done it was freaking phenomenal. But when he explained what he was going to do, I'm like, "You're going in where?" Because I was thinking the back of the neck.
You were thinking the back of the neck, and they're going in this way.
Right here. I'm like,
yeah, there's no access in the back.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Well, to get access in the back, you've got to dig through a lot of tissue.
Okay.
In the front, you just kind of move things to the side.
Move everything up. Okay.
Yeah, and you can have a pretty clear field of view to get in there. But he did this for a long time, and even after he had essentially internally decapitated people,
right,
hospitals were standing by him.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that they were standing by him; they were shuffling him off to other hospitals.
Yeah.
So they didn't have to deal with him, right? I mean, he went up going hospital. They're like, okay, it's not my problem anymore; it's somebody else's problem. Whew, I don't have to worry about his lawsuits anymore.
Right.
Well, it was absurd.
I mean, I was reading an article about him, and apparently there was one surgery at one point where the access surgeon just said, "Hey, get the hell away."
Exactly. Yeah, that was good.
You know, get the hell away from the patient. You know, your hands off this patient now.
So you got a situation where even in modern day medical practice, you can have completely screwed up doctors that have no clue what they're doing, still doing stuff. So I get where you're going, right? So back then, definitely not nearly as much control as there is now, not as much communication and everything else. So yeah, you could have a doctor who would see this and play along, or not know literally how it's happening.
But when it comes to rabbits,
well, if I'm correct, what finally happened was a midwife, okay, who probably had delivered most of the babies for the last 30 years in that village, and knew everything that could happen in a birth. Just stood up and said, "Hey, look, you know, I've been involved in the birthing of 2,000 babies. Ain't seen a single rabbit yet, and something is screwy here.
I ain't birthing me no rabbits.
I don't know nothing about birthing no rabbits."
I don't know nothing about birthing no rabbits, Miss Scarlet.
Oh God,
Miss Scarlet, I don't know nothing about no rabbits.
Well, you see, I put these topics in to the rundown list specifically for this purpose, to occasionally kind of, well, I mean, that's the literal rabbit hole.
There you go. Figuratively speaking, rabbit hole.
No, literally speaking.
Literally speaking.
Literally speaking. But
JJ, you're mighty quiet over there, my man.
he's trying to figure out how to keep us from getting an FCC complaint.
No, I'm honestly wondering how much further I can take it.
You know, the funniest thing to me about that time, that clip, was that just how much Father Mike just jumped into it with both feet.
Oh. And how much I did not want to have that conversation. Every turn, I knew where it was going to go. I knew, oh, this is not going to end well. This is not going to end well. Oh, somebody's going to say down the rabbit hole. I know they are.
One of the things that I miss most is new episodes of the Art Bell Show. Saint Art Bell. Nobody has ever done this type of entertainment better than him. It didn't matter who he was interviewing. It really didn't. He could be interviewing the biggest liar in the world, or he could be interviewing a Nobel Prize winner. And he treated them exactly the same.
It's a gift.
He would occasionally, once he realized he was talking to the biggest liar in the world, say, well, I think we've about talked about this enough. Thank you for your time. I think we're going to go into open lines. But he came up with some guests who I still follow and listen to sometime, like Jose Escamilla, who came up with the Roswell Rods, which is a really, really fascinating topic. And that you too can go find you some rods. Not a particularly difficult thing. They're harder to get with the better digital cameras than back then on tape. It works better in analog. We talked about, what were the other things?
Jellyfish UFOs, high-speed invisible craft. I mean, all the oddball UFO stuff. It was very good.
And so apparently there are people now who still, your iPhone or any of the high-end Android devices, they will record at low resolution at least 240 frames per second, maybe 480. Mm-hmm. And people don't understand this. Do you know that a machine that would record at 240 frames per second back in the 60s, that was $1 million device.
Right.
that could do that. Yeah. And so apparently the idea is you just point your phone to the sky, you get some footage at 240 frames per second, and you can see these craft. I haven't tried this, but anyway, this is kind of the periphery of the UFO topic. So let's get to the jellyfish.
Well, have y'all seen the video of the jellyfish craft?
I saw something, but it looked like what I saw looked like a kite.
I've seen there's two different ones now. There was one that was in the Middle East, which is kind of the most famous one. There was another one that actually took place in a different part of the world that was captured. They look remarkably similar, but the outline looks remarkably like a jellyfish that is in stealth mode. I can't describe it any other way. And it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I don't know what the hell it is, but I wish to goodness I did.
Well, there's a whole area or category in ufology of, well, I say it's got to be ufology, of living creatures that are supposed to be floating around in our sky.
Yes.
That look like jellyfish. They are clear, and you can only see them in certain light situations, and there's this whole theory about these massive creatures that are floating around in our airspace, much like they would float around in the ocean. And there's some interesting photos of them. I don't know. I have kind of a hard time thinking, an airplane hasn't run through one at this point.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking that, yeah. Big, huge things floating around out there. Sooner or later, something's going to hit one.
Yeah,
you wouldn't think that they would move that fast, but
that sounds like it came straight out of the SCP Foundation.
Well, there are people that swear by them. There's people that's the main thing that they research are those creatures, and they don't call them craft, right? They think of them as biologic beings that are floating around in the air.
Well, first off, who remembers Jose Escamilla?
No clue.
I'm just a weirdo. But
hey, you
said it. I didn't.
Jose Escamilla was a guy. He was a videographer, a very high end videographer.
Is this the chemtrail guy?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay.
But he worked for, movie studios and TV stations and this kind of thing. So he had really, really super high-end equipment. So it's not like a guy out there with a
$199 Radio Shack camcorder or anything. He had genuine movie level equipment, and he started seeing these things that he called rods. And he first started noticing them in the Roswell area. You see, he called them Roswell Rods. And I have seen situations, and I've even done it myself, with certain lighting and certain frame rates. Insects, just the movement of their wings ends up looking like this rod that's flying through the air. Really fascinating. However, I don't think that's what Jose Escamilla was. He could at will, on command, he could create the insect rods. He knew exactly how to set his camera. He knew exactly what the frame rate needed to be. He knew exactly what the lighting needed to be to get a rod out of insects. But then he could go and get them where there were no insects. And that story has kind of faded away. I haven't heard anything about Jose Escamilla or rods in a long, long time.
There's another theory that, and I haven't tried this, but I have seen websites that describe how to catch them, that there are craft zipping around in our airspace all day long. But they're moving so fast that we visibly cannot see them. And you have to use a camera with a super, super high,
So you're essentially using
shutter rate.
Right. And I've got one of those cameras.
And I'll have to dig that up. I'll have to look for it. But I've seen a website that gives, like line by line instructions on how to set up the camera and take the pictures and where to look and everything else. But supposedly they're zipping around all the time.
I have a camera that will do 960 frames a second.
That's a lot of frames.
It's a lot of frames. Now, that's not 100,000 frames per second or anything like that. But I don't think that it has to be that fast to catch something along those lines.
No, I don't think so. It seemed like it was. I mean, you had to have a nice camera to do it, but you didn't have to have a 10,000 frame.
Right. Those things
camera.
cost $250,000.
Yeah, they're a lot of money.
Yeah.
The video taken with them is so cool.
Well, so Father Mike, I mean, do you find anything? I'll ask you from the religious side of things. Do you find anything about this that seems demonic, or does this all seem to you just simply a matter of technology we don't understand?
I personally view it as technology that we don't understand. I mean, as far as the other side of the coin of what you said, I think too often, too quickly, the quote-unquote charismatic world are too quick to put a demon on anything.
They really are fast about that, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, but to me personally, you cannot have science without God. You can't have God without science.
Well,
I think they have both proved each other. And so to demonize anything like this, we're humans, and there's things that we don't understand, and we just got to come to the conclusion and have the guts to say at times, I don't know, I don't understand it, but it may be real.
Our last topic today is a very personal one for Vic. This, it's a long one, but I think it's important that I left most of it in to give the full context and just the depth of the story. There's a lot of interesting things that happen here. So it's over 30 minutes long.
And since I'm so emotionally vulnerable.
Yeah, I did enjoy, making sure that was in there. So here's the thing. This clip is about Vic experiencing an upfront and personal view of a Yowie.
Ah, yes.
And
Australia, Blue Mountains, 2004.
It is what I had been wanting him to tell this story on the show for a while. He had told a little bit part of it, I think, on another podcast or two. But even so, what stood out to me was how difficult it was for you to tell the story.
It's still very difficult.
Uncomfortable. You were uncomfortable telling it. You've gotten, after this episode, because I think it was the fullest retelling you had thus far of it, and I think now you're more comfortable expressing everything and telling it. But at the time this episode came out, you still weren't there. You were not. It was not an easy conversation for you to have.
Well, it took me 21 years to get to the point where I'd even tell my son.
Wow.
I mean, it was 21 years before I sat down and told someone the whole story.
See, now I would have told my son when he was about, I don't know, maybe 4, and I had said, if you don't behave, I told you these things can camouflage, right? But I'm not you. You're more moral than I am.
Well, look, I mean, let me just talk for 1 second. I mean, the first time I told the story, actually, in any arena like this, was with Bert.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I told it with Bert is that it was a little calculated, okay? And that, I'm certain that Bert has developed a very, very powerful sense of deception.
Mm-hmm.
When this is a psychiatrist, okay? When
I would hope so.
I would assume that people lie to him. People probably lie to him more than they tell him the truth.
That is probably very true.
And so the thought was, if I'm going to tell it to somebody, I'm going to tell it to Bert. And I'm going to see if I can gauge Bert's response to it. Look, Bert's a rational, brilliant man. And he's thinking, this is a very strange story. But it's also Vic. And, I've not known Vic to lie to me. Then I told it to Vic Cundiff. But I guess you're right. The best telling of the story is here. I think about it every day. I think about it a little bit, and sort of try to, because I hear things like, Bigfoots don't have, it'll either be, there's no evidence that Bigfoots exist. No, that's not quite true. And then it'll be, well, if they do exist, they're not dangerous. Well,
that is definitely not true.
they're not dangerous. And so let's play the story. If you think I'm telling the truth, write to us at feedback@paranormalrundown.com.
Very good.
Do that.
You even said it almost like I do.
Yes.
Feedback@paranormalrundown.com. You're getting that announcer voice.
Yes, you got to get the announcer voice. Or if you think I'm just, full of Penn and Teller's favorite phrase, bullshit, write to us at feedback@paranormalrundown.com. And I understand that there are many people who are going to think that for whatever reason, this is just something I'm making up. When that happens, I just sort of think of myself, walking 10, 12 miles with urine-soaked underwear. And
probably not something you easily forget.
So, all right. Well, here is the Bigfoot. No, it's the Yowie. And they're not the same creature. At least it's not a patty creature.
You could call it the Bigfoot Down Under.
The Bigfoot Down Under. That's a good phrase. Yeah. The Bigfoot Down Under. Down under. Anyway, listen to this and let us know what you think.
The only thing I've ever run into in the woods that was something I didn't really want to run into was not in the United States. It was in Australia. And I am rather proud of myself that it didn't stop me from going into the woods, period.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for Vic to tell this story.
I have been too.
Well, you
Let's
realize,
roll with it. Let's
you,
roll
you
with
realize
it.
I've waited 21 years to tell this story?
What did I tell you guys about becoming vulnerable? Let's do it, man.
That's right.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
Okay, so-
but you've had a couple run-throughs recently.
I've had a couple of run-throughs recently. I've had some run-throughs recently. So Father Mike knows the story. Dave knows the story. JJ, do you know the story?
Nope.
Okay. Hang on a second. I'll give you the exact date.
Hey, Vic.
Yeah.
Vic,
Yeah.
I want you to take your time and take a deep breath, okay?
Oh, I will. I will.
Okay.
I don't want to do that. Let's see. Just gotta give me 1 second. I'll give you the exact date because I can relate it to something. Okay. The events that I'm about to talk about happened, I believe. The earliest it could have happened was February 1st. The latest it could have happened was February 3rd, 2003. And the reason that I can tell you that that's when it happened was because when I got back to civilization and I went to look in the newspaper box, you know, where you can take your quarter or whatever and get yourself a newspaper, it was talking about the Columbia disaster. And I had been out in Nowheresville, and I didn't know it had happened. I had no idea that the Columbia had disintegrated upon coming back into the atmosphere, which made me sad and really made me wish that I had known what was going on. But I didn't have any way of communicating with the outside world. I was in Australia. I went there initially to do work. I went there to work for the Aboriginal Health Service. And we were doing simulation. We were doing, you say, why would you be simulating that? Well, because it's a huge country and people live in, especially many of the Aboriginals, at least back then, they lived in very remote places in the country. And it was a real problem for them to figure out, okay, how do I get materials? How do I get supplies? How do I get occasionally doctors? What do I do if I've only got 50 doctors on staff? How do I make that population of doctors available to 125,000 people out there? You know, how can I extend that with nurse practitioners or just nurses or train people there, you know, out there in the bush? What do I do? It was an interesting job. But you don't get to go to Australia very often. And so once my being in Australia was paid for, I kind of felt like, well, I guess I should take some time and be here for a little longer. I should, you know, go see the country, learn about things. So I fly down to Melbourne, and Australia is actually a really, really beautiful country to fly over. So I'm taking my time. I'm going to take some rabbit holes, as they say. Do you know they've got a really, really big rabbit problem in Australia? They really.
I am actually aware of that.
They really do.
And we're back.
Well, they brought rabbits in
David.
years and years and years ago, and they just got out of control. So they
Really?
Oh, it's terrible.
They brought rabbits into Australia?
Yeah, there were no rabbits in Australia.
Oh,
Now there are now.
I wonder why.
Lots of them.
Lots of them.
I
And
wonder
so
why there was never any there.
well, it was an island from the rest of the world, and rabbits just never got there. So they've built the rabbit-proof fences. There's a fence that goes from the southern coast of Australia all the way to the northern coast of Australia. And then there's one that goes all the way out to the west. It does not control the rabbits. It helps control the rabbits. But anyway, I get down to Melbourne and I decide, okay, I'm going to rent a vehicle that will let me go anywhere I want to go. And so I rented a Mitsubishi Pajero, which is a big diesel-powered SUV. And four-wheel drive, very powerful thing. And I went everywhere. The goal at this time was to find a trailhead where I could park my SUV and I could get my supplies together. I had the ability to filter water. I had food, very simple food. Once you're out there doing that, the food doesn't matter. It's just a fuel source. Can I just get some calories to do what I need to do? So you don't really care about that. I find this particular place, and I've talked to the rangers in the area and said, look, how far back there can I hike? Can I hike 3 days in and then 3 days out? And as long as there's water, I'm happy. All across most of Australia, that was a year of tremendous drought. And they had, there were very few places you could go where there was water. This part of Australia, which was around what's called the Yarra Ranges and kind of south of the Blue Mountains, there was a lot more water there. Okay, so there was water that I could get. And you also see that if the drought gets too bad in Australia, you don't see any animals. They'll go back where it's cool and they'll hide. And they'll try not to use any water. But down here, you could see them. I could see echidnas. I could see lots and lots of wallabies. You'd occasionally see a dingo, that kind of thing. Okay, so the job is I'm going to hike back there, sleep in a hammock, get as far away from humanity as I can. I mean, to me, that's a good time. I know not everybody is going to think that's the best time. I didn't want to be around anyone. I didn't want to talk. Okay, well, what it turned into was, first off, a hike where I initially saw something that was not supposed to exist, but was not frightening. I came around a corner and this rocky, dusty, leaf-covered trail and found myself within 15, 20 feet of a four-legged creature with a huge head, short rear legs, long front legs, really, really long tail, and the most incredibly massive head you've ever seen. It looked like it could eat another one of itself. And it had stripes on it. And so what I saw, and I will attest to my dying day, was a thylacine, a Tasmanian tiger, Tasmanian wolf, whatever you want to call them. Things that are supposed to have been extinct now for, close to 100 years. I don't think they are extinct. I think there are small populations of them still out there. In fact, I know there's at least one small population of them out there. And so if there's one, there must be others. I think they're smart. I think they've figured out how to stay away from people. I think this one was probably really, really pissed off at itself that it didn't stay away from me. And it was pissed off at me for being there. Beautiful animal. The thing that I remember most about it was its eyes. It had these deep black eyes, and they kind of had gold flecks in them. And so it looked at me for a moment. I looked at it. I had all across Australia, I'll show you thousands of slides if you want to see them, a really good camera around my neck. A really good camera. It was a high-end Canon film camera. It had what at the time was the best Tamron super zoom. So 28 to 300, I think. And but it was rolled up. There's no way I could get it out in time. So I didn't get a picture of that thylacine, which would have made, my life a very different kind of life, I think.
Yeah. They're cool-looking critters, too.
They are cool-looking critters. This was a very big one. This was bigger than the ones you can see in the Sydney Zoo, those old films. But if you're watching that thing, watch how it opens its mouth. Okay, I mean, it's just like a maw. It's like it could get its mouth around just about anything. And I can't tell this story easily. This part is not so bad. Later on, it gets a little harder. but I kind of have to I find that I sort of have to walk through the whole thing from the beginning because my brain doesn't really want to think about this. And I kind of have to trick it to get there. Does that make sense, as Father Birdsong says? I kind of have to...
Makes all sense in the world.
I kind of have to trick it to get there.
Yep.
Okay, so look, I learned at that moment, okay, I don't care what they say, they're going to call me an idiot, and they have 100 times. There are thylacine existing in Australia. And I think other people have seen them, and I think... But it kind of gets into the category of just a cryptid. Nobody really believes they're there. The sheep farmers wiped them out, early 20th century. And then I started noticing that there were other animals. Oh, when this thing left, it was beautiful to watch. It just kind of looked at me. Oh, crap, a human. Turned to the side, jumped off into the bush, and you could hear it scuttling around back there, and you could hear others scuttling around back there. So there was noise back there. So this was a family unit of some kind. And I was happy to have seen it. That was it. So I just stopped right there in the trail and just thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. It's like, okay, don't want to let this out of your mind. And then, of course, people say, oh, all you just saw was a brindle dingo. No, I didn't see a brindle dingo. Brindle dingoes don't open their mouths this wide. You know, oh, you just saw a numbat. No, I didn't see a numbat. You know, a numbat's the size of a house cat. This was the size of a Labrador retriever. It was a thylacine.
Which would be big for a dingo anyway, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would be very big for a dingo. Yeah. Anyway, so I keep going. I had hiked in. I was on the second day in there, and so I was a good long way in. And I saw this thylacine, sometime around 2 in the afternoon or something like that. And I'm sort of thinking about the rest of my day. How far in here do I hike? When do I find a place to lay up, to set up my hammock? And that's how I was camping. It was with a, what's the name of that company? Anyway, whatever the most famous hammock company is, I had one of those hammocks.
It's a cool way to camp, too.
It's a
especially the ones they make now.
Oh, very cool way to camp. And really, I mean, we're talking a roll of cloth that's nothing. I mean, it's 2 pounds, maybe. And you're up off the ground. And being up off the ground in Australia is a very good thing. Because
there's things out there that'll kill you.
Well, they'll certainly bite you.
Yeah, and if you're that far out, kill you.
Right, if they're that far out, kill you. I did walk everywhere. I was out there with my snake gaiters, which are these big, thick plastic things you put over your legs. And at some point during that trip, I stepped on a brown snake.
That's the really bad one, right?
Whoa. Yes, it is. You really tripped over?
I stepped on a brown snake.
Do you know how blessed you are to be alive right now?
Well, I was blessed in a certain in 2 ways. I had my snake gaiters on.
Okay.
And 2, I stepped on its head.
Okay. Well, if you can step on it anywhere, that's a good spot.
That's okay. All right.
I stepped on it, and I didn't step on its head deliberately. I mean,
did the serpent bruise your heel?
I had on my that is the Genesis. I had on my German handwag hiking boots.
Oh, I'm glad you did, because those are bad boys.
Yeah, they are.
Well, I mean, Handwag was the company that made most of the Nazi boots. And so, look, they make really good boots. And so I had their hiking boots. Okay. Continue to hike. Sometime around, it was evening. It was getting toward evening. And all of the sounds of the forest change. Everything changes. And the feeling changed. Okay, now, look, this is the story that if I tell people, I always think there's a 50% chance that they're going to consider me an idiot a delusional guy, or they're just going to think, well, Victor's a pretty smart guy. He's just made up a good story.
Or they'll believe you.
Or they'll believe me. There are things that I started experiencing. First off, a feeling of incredible dread and fear and anxiety. Then a feeling of exceeding nausea, extreme nausea, like you're going to throw your toenails up kind of nausea. And then there was a smell, and it was unlike any other smell that I've ever smelled. Not the fact that it was just a horrible smell, but the fact that it wasn't like any other smell. If there's a dead dog in your yard, you will smell it all the way across your yard. But you'll smell it faintly, and as you get closer to it, the smell will get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. There's not a point where you come across that yard and the smell stops. And then you walk another few steps and it starts again. Smells don't do that. At least okay.
But this one did.
This one did. The smell was something. Look, I mean, you've heard the descriptions, and that's what it's a mixture of, wet dog and dead animal and feces and sewer gas and skunk. Skunk was a pretty powerful part of it. I mean, skunk is a thiol smell, and humans are really good at smelling thiols. So I'm aware that something isn't right, and I mean, the best I can tell you is the Dementor feeling of like all the happiness has gone out of the world. That was what I began to feel, and it could hit you, and then it could go away. It could hit you, and then it could go away. And so pretty soon I become aware that something is very wrong, and I'm, at least 15 hours away from the trailhead. So not a lot to do. Finally coming to a clearing. Across the clearing, about as big as a big living room, was a 9-foot tall humanoid thing. And the reason I say it's 9 feet tall was because even under this circumstance, I was analytical, and so I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's the angle of my head? Because I'm thinking of a basketball goal. Okay, how high do I have to look to see that basketball goal? And it wasn't quite as tall as a basketball goal, but it was almost as tall as a basketball goal. Have you ever seen a Discovery Channel special about octopuses or octopi? And they'll show an octopus swimming along.
It's octopuses, but yes.
Yes, you will see an octopus swimming along, and you can see it just fine. And then it'll get up against a complex rock, and it's like it disappears. The various chromatophores on its body change, and even the texture of its body changes. Yep. And it matches that rock. That's what this thing could do. That's exactly what this thing could do. It was like...
Hey, Vic.
Yeah?
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah?
Vic, I just bless you with peace.
Oh, it's getting easier, but thank you.
Okay. I bless you with peace and grace.
It's getting easier. I mean, I'm pretty sure we don't have any of these guys in New York. Or if we do, they're much smaller.
Okay.
But thank you.
Just want to make sure, son.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Okay. So I say see, but it's almost more like just be aware. It was like the piloerector muscles on this thing could control its hair, and it was hair, it wasn't fur, so exquisitely that it could kind of just, it was like a metamaterial. It could fade in and out of that background. And it was standing next to some trees. And I stop somewhere in here about this time. I let go of my bladder, and I came real close to letting go of everything. But I honestly really did not want to let go of everything. And there are two reasons. One, that's embarrassing. Second off, I didn't want to have to hike with a load in my pants.
Definitely not.
I'm just gonna
Talking about a crusty keister
I
cavity.
did not want to hike with a load in my pants. All right, so as this thing becomes aware that I can see it kind of seems to decide that it's better for me to see it better than I could see it originally. So it does its magic. It does whatever it is doing to change the angle of those hairs relative to the sunlight or relative to the trees, and it becomes more and more and more visible. And then look, I got to tell you, I've sat here and I've thought, how much time was involved in this? How much time did this experience take once I ran into this thing? And I don't know. I don't know if it was 10 seconds or 10 minutes. I just know it was more than 10 seconds, but I don't know exactly how long it took. So, after a little bit, it had pretty much completely revealed itself. It was, first off, monstrous, huge, 3 meters, 9 feet tall, a little more than 9 feet tall. Muscular like you can't imagine. Hands that were beyond belief, like the hands of David on the Michelangelo statue.
Yeah, I was going to say, my hands aren't that big.
Yeah. Well, take a look at the Michelangelo statue, yeah. David, and those hands are monstrous. But he was such a wonderful artist that it doesn't look that way. Anyway, huge, huge, huge hands. Not a humanoid face. More of a snout kind of thing. And a lot of extra hair up here. Can't tell you what kind of ears it had. Can't tell you if it had ears at all. It wasn't like an American Patty that didn't have any neck. I mean, if you look at Patty, Patty looks like a monster wrestler or something. This thing looked more like a very, very powerful NBA athlete with a snout and hands the size of David's. Okay, so I got to tell you, your brain shuts off. It's just, I don't know what that is. And the only question you have in your mind is it going to kill me?
It's a good question. It's a good question to be asking.
Is it going to kill me? And you have zero control. I mean, you talk about being in a situation where you just don't have any control of your life at all. That's it. You don't have any control. I mean, most people, I don't know. Did I handle it better than most people or worse than most people? I don't know. I made a mistake. There was the ego-driven part of me that said, well, I missed my camera last time. Maybe I should use my camera this time. And I kind of moved my hand toward the camera. And it made it very clear that wasn't a good idea. You know, kind of a... And there was nothing else. There were no huge roars or growls or anything like that. The eyes were intelligent. The eyes were decision-making eyes. Okay, if you look at I've also run into bears. Okay, bears don't have decision-making eyes. Bears have eyes of, oh, there's a thing that's not supposed to be here. I'm either going to run or he's going to run. There's really no other decisions. This thing had decision-making eyes, and it kind of seemed like at some point the decision was made that I'm not going to kill it because it could have killed me so fast that I couldn't have done a darn thing. And so I don't know if this is, I've never really thought about this. There was some kind of communication going on, definitely because of this feeling of nausea and dread and that smell that just kept coming and going. But
the nausea and the dread could have been
very natural.
Well, it could have been sound, right? It could have been.
I've read about infrasound.
Infrasound,
yeah,
and so, that can certainly cause feelings like that if it's strong enough,
or even anxiety at that moment.
Yes. Well, so
but he felt that before, right? He felt that before that started.
The first thing I felt.
Okay. That would seem like a defense mechanism.
Okay.
When I hear these people on 100 different podcasts and on TV talk about, I'm an expert in this and I know exactly what they're doing. Bullshit.
Yeah.
You sir, don't know dick. I'm sorry.
Hello.
But you do. you do not.
They obviously have not experienced it.
All I knew was that, all right, time to go.
Yeah.
And so of the whole time, the moment of the greatest fear was turning around to walk the other way. Because so this means I got to take my eyes off of you, and I got to turn around, and I got to start walking. And
well, I got to hand it to you, Vic, because I'm going to be very, very, very honest with you right now.
Yeah.
Not only would I have pissed myself,
you might have taken.
I would have defecated myself too.
Well, I was able to avoid
You're
that.
You're a better man than I am.
That was the only moment of, I don't know, redeeming moment I had. Look, I turn around and I start walking, and sometimes life gets down to very, very simple decisions. And Father Bert's like, I'm not trying to make anything difficult on you, but I know that there were moments in time when you were going through your back pain where your world comes down to, can I take that next step?
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Daily. Yeah.
Can I lift my foot to get over that threshold? Can I turn? Okay, that's all that matters in the entire world. You're not caring about tomorrow. All you're caring about is that next step.
Right now.
That next step. And that was my entire world.
Well, you just explained my whole world right now, because that's the way it is sometimes. But I can only imagine what it was for you at that time. Well, see, first and foremost, you experienced what people said, well, it might have been a big dingo. That's a whole nother story.
The thylacine was delightful. I was happy about that.
Yeah, of course. But then you went from that high to a great
I never thought about that either.
Moment. You know, I mean, we've all experienced a oh shit moment. You know,
yeah, I've had a few.
You experienced a major one, and you know this creature, you know, that's what we call in the States a Bigfoot.
And there they call it a Yowie.
But for people to say that they're experts in it, they have obviously never experienced it firsthand, because if they did, their stories would change and they would be a little bit more humble, as you are right now. And
I mean,
so
look.
every story that I've heard about people seeing Bigfoots, there was no humbleness. So that makes me want to call BS on every story that I've heard.
Well,
I've heard some. I've heard some Bigfoot stories where it's not, you know.
Well, I've also heard got out by a 12-gauge shotgun and blew his damn head off.
Yeah. Okay. Let me know how that works out for.
That's not going to work out for you. Look, I mean, you know, I am a believer in evolution. Okay.
Yeah, JJ's trying to say something.
Go ahead, JJ. Sorry.
So, would you say that this looked more like a Bigfoot, or was it more resembling like a loup-garou?
More like a loup-garou.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think it could have been SCP-1000?
Oh, certainly could have been. I don't know what SCP-1000 is, but
we have to talk about the SCP Foundation.
We got to talk about SCP.
Well, my limited research
calls that the American equivalent of the Bigfoot. But like I said, very limited research.
Well, I mean, look, you do start thinking again after a period of time.
Yeah.
Okay, and the thinking. Look, I mean, a Lukaroo is going to have a big ass snout. Okay,
Right.
This did not have a big snout. It was a humanoid snout-like face with some hair on it, and a lot of hair up front. Okay, or up top. Ask me what color the skin was? No freaking idea. I don't know.
Of course you don't.
I don't know. I don't know what the color of the skin was. Was it? I'm thinking kind of grayish, brownish, something like that. I don't know what color the skin was. Anyway, walking along, and the thoughts in your mind are, I'd like to turn around and look and see if it's there. I want to turn around and look. I'm not going to turn around and look.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I am. No, I'm not. Yeah, I am. No, I'm
not. I'm not going to turn around and look. And I never did. I never did turn around to look. What I noticed was that after I had walked for about an hour, and the sounds of the forest started to come back, the feeling became less oppressive. The feeling was like the regular woods. And I walked as long as I could until I just was so tired that I couldn't even move. Well, there we have it. A 4-episode deep dive into the first season of the Paranormal Rundown. That was a lot of fun to do, actually. Help us out if you can, if you know anybody who loves this kind of programming. And I guess there's a lot of paranormal programming out there, but none that I can think of that works in exactly the same way as the Rundown. Send it to your friends. Send it to them. Let them know there's something different out there. This, of course, is Vic Hermanson signing off for 2024. The music you heard is from Lobo Loco, Smart Sound, or is simply in the public domain. Any media clips we use are used under the protection of the Fair Use Doctrine. As always, please contact us at feedback@paranormalrundown.com. 2024 has been a good year. I'm going to try very hard to make 2025 better, with more guests, and maybe the topic list will get up to, who knows, maybe 3,000. It's going to be hard to make it much bigger than that. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. And you'll hear us again in 2 weeks. Good night.